Story 1. Parents put me up for adoption as a kid because I was a boy. Now they contacted me after 20 years asking for money to fund my sister's education. I am 25M. My story goes back to the time when I was 6, or rather, since the time I was born. I'm the third and youngest child of my parents. We were not rich, but my parents made decent money to raise 3 kids. We lived in a small town in an ancestral house, which saved us a lot of expenses. Grandparents owned a farm that sufficed a significant portion of our kitchen needs. Dad is a truck driver and comes home every 3 to 4 days. Mom works as a waitress. My parents already had 2 daughters when they conceived me. I was the unplanned one, and you know the sentiments of the parents when an unplanned child pops up. Obviously, I didn't know about all this as a kid, but as I grew up, I started understanding these terms in bits and pieces, and it wasn't pleasant to know that I'm unwanted. My parents wanted to get rid of me, but the doctor advised against it because it could have led to some major health concerns for my mother. My parents, especially my mother, wanted a girl. Her reason was very simple. She wanted me to use the discarded clothes of my elder siblings so that she didn't have to buy new clothes for me. My 2 elder sisters had a year of age gap, so they pretty much had the same sized clothes interchangeably. It was fun for them. However, when I was born as a boy, my parents were disappointed. They hated my guts. They dressed me in girls' clothes and even sent me to school with my sister's discarded uniform. It was just so embarrassing for me as a kid. Though I was very small at that time, I still have a blurred memory of how I was being bullied for wearing a girl's uniform and long hair. If I even complained about it, all I got was a thrashing from my mom. I grew up hearing nothing but abuse and harsh words from my parents, most of which I didn't use to understand then, and when I understood, I hated my parents. Dad was still better than Mom, but he used to be away for most of the days and was flaky in nature. On some days, I thought he was neutral between all 3 of us, and on some days he behaved as evil as Mom, if not more. I won't say I was a saint kid. I used to revolt when I started understanding their biases towards me and my sisters. They always got the best of everything, and I got their leftovers, so I started being evil to them because as a kid I held them responsible for my misery. Yes, I was grounded for my actions, sometimes quite severely. I had to make my own breakfast and was left without dinner on many occasions. Understand the pleas of a 6-year-old going through this. There was one incident that I remember quite vividly, and I think that was the game changer of my life. That day or that week, I don't remember exactly, I was being severely bullied in the playground for dressing up like a girl. I came home and found that Mom had brought some new clothes for my sisters for the holidays, and bam! I took a pair of scissors and cut them into confetti. I know I was wicked, and I'm not proud of what I did, but I was sick, subjected to trolling because of my parents. It came from a place of pain and not evilness. Instead of understanding my pain, my parents considered that to be a sin that deserved the strictest punishment of all. They put me up for adoption. They waited for a month, but there were no takers, and that anger was also unleashed on me. I was constantly told how useless I am, that no one wants to have me. There were times I heard my mom saying, "I wished I had gender checked. I would have never got him into the world." It haunts me to know that my parents hate me so much, and for a reason that is not in my control. After some time, when there was no response for my adoption, they started talking about this to their friends and relatives. Dad had known someone next town who ran a food van with his wife. They were relatively poorer than us but wanted a child. They were in their late 30s and had been trying for a child for more than a decade, but there was no luck. Dad spoke to them and they readily agreed to adopt me. I remember that moment when Dad broke this news to Mom and my sisters. They were delighted and joyous to get rid of me. Dad also gave a disclaimer that they were poor and that I might never be able to attend school. Mom rolled her eyes and said, "Who cares? Just drop in there tomorrow." I stood there numb at the corner holding the curtain. No matter how much I hated my family, I was scared and hurt having to leave them. I had tears in my eyes, but I didn't cry out loud. They were so happy enjoying the moment that they forgot I was there. When Dad saw me in tears, he came forward, rubbed my back, and said, "Pack your stuff. We'll leave tomorrow morning to your new family." I cried out loudly when he said this, but I realized that it was going on deaf ears, so I went to my room, packed my stuff, praying that my new family was less wicked. The next day, Dad drove me to the next town. I don't exactly remember the emotions I was going through, but I wasn't crying. Maybe I was just numb when I was leaving the house and throughout the drive. My new family was indeed poor. They had a tiny house with one room. They had renovated the storehouse into my room. I had no complaints because they at least made an effort to provide me with a room. I never had my own room or a bed. My sisters had a bed, and I was put up on a cot at the corner of their room in a tiny closet for my belongings. This room was comparatively smaller than our room, but it was cozy. My new parents, Mary and John, were warm and loving, but I came from a disturbed household. I had never experienced that love. Yes, I saw my parents showering their love on my sisters, but never on me. I used to doubt my new parents' intentions and took their love to be just a temporary one. I tried not to get attached to them because I feared that they might also throw me away. Childhood trauma, you know. It took me many months to realize that they actually loved me and were not putting up a facade. Yes, my school was discontinued that year because my parents moved me here mid-session. But my new parents promised to get me to school next year. That year, I witnessed how they worked extra hard to save money to get me into a school. That's when I started loving them back. My adoption turned out to be a blessing in disguise. My biological parents never showed up after shipping me to Mary and John. Honestly, I was relieved because here I was treated by my original identity as a boy. Mary and John were very hardworking people. They worked for 14 to 16 hours a day for their food truck. The truck was located just outside of their apartment, so I was not left alone when they were working. I could see them right through my bedroom window. Eventually, I started spending my day on the truck, helping them with whatever I could. When I got admitted to the school, I gave my full time to studies but helped them with the chores whenever I was free. I was a little over 10 when I helped John at the cash counter. I was pretty good at calculation. I learned business and accounting from a very early age. After high school, I wanted to run their business full-time, but they both insisted that I complete my college education first. They funded it with their savings. They were getting too old and weak to run a food truck. I wanted to take their responsibility the way they took mine, but they assured they can manage for a few more years and I should pursue college. I studied business and accounting in college because I ultimately wanted to be an entrepreneur. My graduation day was the happiest day of my life. John and Mary were over the moon. They even asked my biological parents to attend the convocation, but they didn't turn up. After college, I wanted to run the food van and let Mary and John retire, but they had planned something else for me. They had accumulated handsome savings, and he handed that over to me. I was overwhelmed with his gesture. He said they can survive on their own for a few more years, but they didn't want to drag me into this. He gave me the money to start a business of my own. I didn't want to blindly waste his money, so I used my business knowledge. I hunted for a small local eatery at a good location that was struggling for sales. I pitched it to the owner to lease out to me on a profit-sharing model. After several rejections, I got one. I started it from scratch, renovated the place and menu according to the millennials and Gen Z's tastes, and gave the best services to the customers. The sales rocketed within a year, and I made 2x profit on the investment. 4 years into this, and now I have 3 cafes in the town running successfully. I upgraded Mary and John to a better apartment. I got a tiny place for myself. I had been living with them until now. I asked them to get rid of their food truck and enjoy their retirement, but they insisted on continuing it for their happiness. When I left the house with my suitcase, I never imagined myself to be a college graduate, but here I am running restaurant chains in the town. Fast forward to last month, it was a usual day at work. I was busy at the cash counter of one of the restaurants when I saw a familiar face. I felt as if I saw a ghost. It was my biological father. I was seeing him after all almost 2 decades. He looked pale and weak. He walked with a wide smile across the counter and hugged me. There were customers in the store, so I didn't say anything and took him to the corner. His face brought back all the harrowing memories of my childhood. I wouldn't have been able to write such details about my past if they didn't reappear in my life. He said he was so happy and proud to see me successful in life. I didn't know what to say. I stood there numb. He said he was passing by and met John, who told him about my successful venture. He said he would get my mom on the weekend. I didn't say anything, and he left shortly after that. After wrapping up my day, I went to John and told him that I didn't want to meet my biological parents who disowned me for being a boy. They knew about my distressed childhood. I wanted to run away and hide somewhere on the weekend, but Mary insisted that I forgive my parents and move on. I agreed to meet them on the condition that Mary and John should be present with me. So, my biological parents arrived at John's house. I thought they would apologize for what they did to me, but I tell you they had zero remorse. Instead, they counted the favors on me. Mom said I should be thankful to them that they found such good parents for me who raised me to be a successful individual. I was shocked to hear that. I wanted to give it back to them, but Mary held my hand, gesturing to me to calm down. I diplomatically said, "I'm blessed to have John and Mary as my parents. I can describe the meeting as awkward for me." The next day, I got a call from my mother. I didn't recognize her voice. How would I? It was the first time she had called me in 20 years. It was a demand for money. She said that Dad had lost his regular job and had been working on a contractual basis for years now. She had also lost her job because apparently no restaurant needs a 50-year-old waitress. It was difficult for them to make ends meet. I asked how much she needed, and she said $20,000 would suffice. She had borrowed that money from her friends over the last few months to run the groceries at the house, and now her friends were asking for the money back and she had none. I hung up the call, saying, "I think about it and get back." Now the thing is, no matter how much I hate them, I feel bad that people are chasing them for money. Sometimes I feel she's just exploiting me. But what if they genuinely need help? I'll feel bad for letting them go through the embarrassment, even though I had the money. Update 1. Thanks for all the comments and kudos. I got quite mixed reactions from the people regarding helping out my mom with $20,000. I then discussed it with Mary and John. Mary was happy that I was considering helping my parents, but she also cautioned me to be vigilant. John said it was my money, so I should take the decision. He also had the same fear as me, that what if they were trying to misuse my emotions. After thinking a lot about it, I agreed to take this first and last bet on my biological parents and made the transfer to her account. I did feel good that I was able to help out my family, even though they were mean to me, but I was wrong. Perhaps I should say I was right because I dreaded they were going to exploit me financially, and they are indeed trying to. A week after sending the money, Mom called me again. I responded with mixed feelings. She thanked me for the help, and then she said, "Your sisters want to meet you. So when do you think you can make it?" At that moment, I really felt that my family wanted me back. I know my parents wronged me when I was a kid, and I hated them, but I never hated my sister. Maybe as a small kid I would have done some evil things to them, but after I grew up I never held them responsible. It wasn't their fault. Sometimes I even thought that my parents got rid of me because they were poor and not because they were evil. I told Mom that we could meet on the coming Sunday and that I could drive home. She interjected saying, "Why don't we meet somewhere outside?" I didn't think a lot about this and I just said okay. She said she would text the location and time details in some time. After I hung up, I felt this uneasiness, like why she didn't want me to visit home. I mean, yes, it doesn't matter where you meet, but still, meeting your family after so many years, don't you think you would call them home instead of meeting them at a restaurant? Nevertheless, she sent me the details of the restaurant, and it was one of the fanciest restaurants in town. I didn't think much at that time because my mind was stuck at the point that they didn't invite me home. I went to the restaurant. They were already there. My sisters rushed to hug me. For a moment, I was happy to see them after so many years. I was having fun catching up with them until the menu came, and they started ordering the food. They deliberately were looking for the priciest food. When they asked my father what he wanted, he just grinned and said, "Order the most expensive one. My son is a big man now." That was so petty of him to say that. Had John or Mary said this, I would have been a proud son. But this coming from my biological parents was mean and wicked. There was nothing I could do. I sat there watching them gorging over the food, plundering my wallet. Yes, I paid the bill too. There were very wild thoughts running in my mind like ghosting them before the bill, but that would have been too severe for them. I pledged right there never to get into their emotional trap again. I was cold for the rest of the evening, and I bet they didn't notice it. While leaving, also, they didn't invite me home. Instead, my elder sister asked, "So where are we dining next?" I faked a smile and said, "Nowhere," and waved them goodbye. I came back and told Mary about my greedy family. She was shocked to know that. She's a very kind and independent woman. She found all these to be very disturbing. She advised me not to be a fool again, and also not to think too much about them and to focus on my life. I did that. My sisters called me after a week or so, but I didn't respond to them. My mother also called me, but I didn't respond. It's been 2 months since then, and now they stopped texting or calling me. I think they got my hint that I didn't want them in my life. Update 2. Hello everyone. Thanks for all the love. As I mentioned in my last post, I stopped responding to my sisters and my biological parents because I understood they wanted me only for the money. Almost after 5 months, yesterday, she called me again. I saw the phone ringing, and I answered it impromptu. She began with small talk, asking about me and my work. It sounded so fake and pretentious that I couldn't bear it. I asked her, what did she want? She took a deep breath and said, "My sisters had to drop out of college, and because Dad couldn't pay their tuition fees, so they wanted me to fund their college education." I flipped out. She asked me to calm down and said, they were my sisters, my family, and I should help them. I was at work at that time and didn't want to mess up my head, so I hung up. She called me again in the evening. I ignored the call a few times, but it was bothering me. Ignoring was not the solution, I realized. The next time she called, I answered. She asked, "Your sisters are very excited to rejoin their college, so how are we going about it? Will you be paying at one shot or semester-wise? I suggest you transfer the whole amount to me, and I will pay the tuition before each semester. You don't need to take the trouble." I was like, woo-hoo. Hold on, lady. I'm not going to make any payments. She was so surprised. She didn't expect no to be an answer. She asked, "What do you mean you don't want to pay it a shot?" "It's fine, we can manage in installments as well." I repeated, "I don't want to pay it in either way. My elder sister's education is not my responsibility, especially when my parents had abandoned me and never checked up on me. Even now, you guys are talking to me just because you could leech on my money." She was boiling with anger and lost her mind at my words. She said, "Don't you forget that we birthed you? Whatever you are is because of us. Your dad found a good guardian for you, and now when it's your time to repay us, you cannot shy away from your responsibilities. Your sisters and your parents are your responsibilities, and you have to take care of all of us." I had a lot to say, but it was just falling on deaf, narcissistic ears, so I just said, "Well, yes, I do owe a lot to my parents, that is John and Mary. They deserve all the credit for success. And for you guys, I don't know who you are. None of my documents have your name, nor do I have any photographs with you folks, so I don't think I know you all." She was hurling abuses at me, but I said, "Wrong number, lady," and hung up. Now, whatever you call me, selfish, cruel, or whatever, I'm not going to shower my hard-earned money on my so-called family. They were never my family. They got rid of me when I was just 6. And yes, I got comments in my last updates that I call John and Mary by their names and not Mom and Dad. Actually, I do call them Mom and Dad. Not immediately after coming to them, but when they got me to school and worked hard to provide for my needs and loved me, I got attached to them and called them Mom and Dad. For the sake of narrating the things here, I referred to them by their names. John and Mary are my actual mom and dad, and for my biological parents, I don't call them anything. They don't exist for me now. Now on to the next story. Story 2. Before we start, if you're enjoying this video so far, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. Now let's continue. My stepdad kicks me out of his house because his real daughter is pregnant and he wants space for his real grandchild. Now, a year later, he himself has been kicked out. I, 25F, have been living with my mom, 48F, and stepdad, 52M, in my stepdad's house for the past 3 years. My stepsister, Ella, 28F, also lives here because her husband works overseas. The thing is, Ella and I have never gotten along, and the tension between us has only gotten worse over time. From the moment our parents started dating, Ella made it clear she didn't approve. She would roll her eyes whenever my mom came up in conversation and made mean comments about how her dad could do better. When our parents got married 5 years ago, Ella refused to attend the wedding, claiming she had a work emergency. But I later found out from a mutual friend that she was actually at a beach party that day, posting selfies and drinking margaritas while our parents exchanged vows. After the wedding, Ella's attitude towards me went from cold to downright harsh. When I first moved in 3 years ago, she welcomed me by leaving a list of house rules on my bed. Rules that only seemed to apply to me, like quiet hours starting at 8 p.m. and no guests allowed without 48 hours notice. Of course, she never followed these rules herself. Since then, Ella has gone out of her way to make me feel unwelcome. She accidentally spills drinks on my clothes at least once a month, always claiming it was a mistake but never offering to help clean up or pay for dry cleaning. She eats food I've clearly labeled in the fridge, then gaslights me by insisting I must have eaten it myself and forgotten. She constantly makes nasty comments about my appearance, like asking if I've given up when I wear sweats around the house or suggesting I should do something about my acne. One incident that really stands out happened about a year ago. I had a box of childhood mementos stored in the garage, old report cards, art projects, photos, that sort of thing. One day, I went to get something from the box and found it was gone. When I asked Ella about it, she casually mentioned that she had thrown it out while decluttering the garage. She claimed she thought it was just old junk and acted like I was overreacting when I got upset. I'm still devastated about losing those irreplaceable memories. To keep the peace, I've tried to limit my interactions with Ella as much as possible. I mostly stay in my room when I'm home, only going out to use the bathroom or grab quick meals from the kitchen. I've started doing my laundry late at night to avoid running into her. I even bought a mini fridge for my room so I could store some basic food items without worrying about Ella eating them. But it's hard to completely avoid someone when you live under the same roof. Family dinners are especially tense. Last Thanksgiving, Ella started a huge argument at the table, accusing me of flirting with her husband before he left for his overseas job. It was completely untrue. I barely even spoke to the guy beyond basic pleasantries. But Ella went on a rant about how I was always throwing myself at him and how she couldn't trust me around her marriage. The accusation was so out of left field that I was stunned into silence. My mom tried to defuse the situation, but my stepdad just sat there, not defending me at all. The argument ended with Ella storming off and me in tears. It caused a massive family rift that lasted for weeks, with extended family members taking sides and holiday plans getting canceled. Throughout all of this, it's been clear that my stepdad favors Ella. He's always bragging about her accomplishments, no matter how minor. If Ella gets a small promotion at work, he treats it like she's become CEO. Meanwhile, when I finished my degree last year, he barely acknowledged it. My stepdad also constantly brushes off Ella's bad behavior. When I complained about her eating my food, he just shrugged and said, "That's what sisters do." When I tried to talk to him about the mementos she threw away, he said I was living in the past and should be grateful for the decluttering. But if I so much as leave a dirty dish in the sink or forget to take out the trash, he lectures me for hours about respecting his house rules. Things came to a head last week when Ella announced she's pregnant. Her husband had just gone back overseas for work, so she'll be staying here throughout her pregnancy. My stepdad was over the moon about becoming a grandfather. He immediately started talking about converting the guest room into a nursery, going on and on about paint colors and crib designs. The next day, my stepdad pulled me aside for a serious talk. He said that with Ella's pregnancy, the house was getting too crowded and that Ella would need extra space and support during this time. Then he dropped the bomb. He thought it was time for me to start looking for my own place. I was shocked. I've been living here for years and contributing to household expenses, and suddenly I'm being kicked out because Ella is pregnant. Later that evening, I overheard my stepdad talking to my mom in their bedroom. He was pressuring her to convince me to move out, saying things like, "Ella needs a stress-free environment for the baby, and it's time for your daughter to stand on her own 2 feet. He also mentioned that Ella had been complaining about feeling uncomfortable with me in the house. My mom seemed hesitant, making non-committal noises, but she didn't strongly object either. Over the next few days, my stepdad launched a full-scale campaign to get me out of the house. He started leaving apartment listings on my bed, circling rent prices that were way out of my budget. He would talk loudly about the benefits of living independently whenever I was in earshot, telling stories about how he grew as a person when he got his first apartment. He even offered to pay my first month's rent if I found a place quickly, acting like he was doing me a huge favor. One evening, he cornered me in the kitchen and started listing all the reasons why I should move out. He said I was holding Ella back from fully settling in, that I was a financial burden on the family despite the rent I pay, and that it was selfish of me to take up space when Ella needed it more. He even implied that the stress of living with me might be bad for Ella's pregnancy. I was hurt and angry, especially since I've always tried to be a respectful housemate. The final straw came when my stepdad changed the Wi-Fi password and refused to give me the new one. He said I could have it back when I showed him proof that I'd been apartment hunting. It felt like such a petty move, and it made working from home nearly impossible. I had to use up all my mobile data just to attend Zoom meetings for my job. I finally decided to confront my mom about the situation. I asked her directly if she wanted me to move out. She hemmed and hawed, eventually admitting that she and my stepdad had been discussing asking me to leave, but she hadn't agreed to anything yet. She seemed torn between supporting me and keeping the peace with her husband. I told my mom that I wasn't ready to move out yet. I'm still saving up for a down payment on my own place, and the current rental market in our area is insane. Even a small studio apartment would eat up most of my monthly income. Plus, I don't think it's fair that I'm being pushed out just because Ella is pregnant. There's plenty of room in this house for all of us if Ella and I could just learn to coexist. My refusal to leave has caused a huge uproar in the family. Ella is playing the victim, claiming that the stress of living with me might harm her baby. She's been walking around the house with her hand on her stomach, wincing dramatically whenever I enter a room. My stepdad is furious and has started giving me the silent treatment, communicating with me only through passive-aggressive notes left on the fridge. Even some extended family members have gotten involved. My aunt called me to say I was being selfish and that family should come first. My cousin messaged me on Facebook, telling me to grow up and stop freeloading off my parents. It feels like everyone is ganging up on me, and no one is considering my side of things. The whole situation has put a huge strain on my relationship with my mom. I feel like she's not standing up for me, choosing her new family over her own daughter. We used to be really close, but now there's this tension between us all the time. I catch her giving me these sad, guilty looks, but she still won't directly stand up to my stepdad. Ella, meanwhile, is milking her pregnancy for all it's worth. She's constantly asking my stepdad to run out for bizarre food cravings, even in the middle of the night. She's taken over the living room with pregnancy books and baby catalogs. She even started playing Mozart through speakers, saying it's for the baby, but I'm pretty sure it's just to annoy me since she knows I'm trying to work from home. I feel like I'm going crazy. Am I really the a-hole for not wanting to uproot my entire life just because my stepsister is pregnant? I've lived here for years without major issues, at least on my end, and I don't see why Ella's pregnancy suddenly changes everything. I'm not against the idea of moving out eventually, but I want to do it on my own terms, when I'm financially ready. On the other hand, I know this is technically my stepdad's house, and he has the right to decide who lives here. And maybe I am being selfish by not prioritizing Ella's needs during her pregnancy. I know pregnancy can be stressful, and maybe having me around really is causing her anxiety. But the thought of being forced out of my home while Ella gets everything she wants yet again makes my blood boil. I'm also worried about my mom. I don't want to put her in a position where she has to choose between me and her marriage. But at the same time, I feel like if I leave now, I'll be giving up any chance of ever having a real relationship with my stepdad or being seen as part of this family. The whole situation has me stressed out and losing sleep. I've started looking at apartments just to appease my stepdad, but my heart isn't in it. Every listing I see just reminds me of how unaffordable everything is and how unprepared I am to live on my own right now. So, Reddit, AITA for refusing to move out? Should I stand my ground and fight for my place in this family? Or should I just accept that I'll never be as important to them as Ella and her baby? I'm at my wit's end and could really use some outside perspective on this mess. Update. A lot has changed since my last update, and I never expected to be writing this update. After my last post, Things at home got even worse. My stepdad intensified his efforts to get me to leave, making comments about my presence being a burden on the family. Ella's pregnancy symptoms seemed to worsen whenever I was around, and she'd dramatically clutch her stomach and complain about stress. The breaking point came during a heated family dinner. My stepdad brought up the topic of me moving out again, and I finally snapped. I told them how unfair and hurtful their behavior had been. I reminded them that I paid rent and contributed to the household and that I wasn't ready financially to move out. To my shock and disappointment, my mom took my stepdad's side. She said that while she loved me, Ella's pregnancy had to take priority. She suggested I could stay with my aunt temporarily until I found a place of my own. I felt completely betrayed, realizing I no longer had any allies in the house. I decided it was time to leave. I spent the next few weeks frantically searching for an affordable apartment and eventually found a tiny studio on the other side of town. It wasn't ideal, but it was all I could manage on my entry-level salary. Moving out was one of the hardest things I've ever done. I felt angry, hurt, and abandoned by my family. The first few months on my own were tough. I had to budget carefully to make ends meet, often skipping meals or picking up extra shifts at work to cover my expenses. Over time, though, things got better. I threw myself into my job and eventually got a promotion. I made new friends in my apartment building and started to enjoy the freedom of living on my own. I even adopted a cat, something I could never have done at my stepdad's house due to Ella's alleged allergies. My relationship with my mom and stepdad became distant. We talk occasionally on the phone, but our conversations were always superficial. They never apologized for how they treated me, and I never fully forgave them. I didn't visit the house, not wanting to deal with Ella or be reminded of the painful memories. I heard through some relatives that Ella had given birth to a baby boy. My mom sent me a picture, but I didn't respond. I couldn't bring myself to feel happy about the new addition to a family that had cast me aside. Life went on, and I slowly built a new normal for myself. I dated a bit, made progress in my career, and even started therapy to deal with the lingering pain from my family situation. I was doing okay, not great, but okay. Then, about a week ago, everything changed again. I received a call from my mom. She was crying so hard I could barely understand her at first. When she finally calmed down enough to speak, what she told me left me speechless. Apparently, shortly after I moved out, Ella and her husband had started working on my stepdad. They convinced him that since Ella was his only biological child, she should be the one to inherit his assets. They played on his emotions, talking about securing the future for their son, his only grandchild. First, it was just small things. Ella convinced my stepdad to add her name to his bank accounts, claiming it would be easier for her to help manage his finances. Then she suggested he transfer the title of his car to her name, arguing that it would save on insurance costs. Gradually, they worked up to bigger assets. Ella and her husband talked about estate planning, emphasizing the importance of having everything in order for the baby's future. They brought in a lawyer friend of theirs who drew up new documents. My stepdad, blinded by his love for Ella and his excitement about being a grandfather, signed everything without really understanding the implications. Over the course of several months, Ella and her husband managed to get my stepdad to transfer nearly all his assets into Ella's name. This included the house, his retirement accounts, and even his small business. My mom, who had always been passive in financial matters, went along with whatever my stepdad wanted. The final blow came last week. Ella and her husband sat my mom and stepdad down for a talk. They announced that they wanted to make some changes to the living situation. They said that with the baby, they needed more space and privacy. Then they dropped the bombshell. They wanted my mom and stepdad to move out. My stepdad was confused at first, thinking Ella was joking, but she was dead serious. She explained that since the house was now in her name, she had the right to decide who lived there. She gave them 2 weeks to pack up and leave. When my stepdad protested, Ella's husband pulled out the legal documents my stepdad had signed. Everything was ironclad. My stepdad had unknowingly signed away his rights to everything he owned. He and my mom were left with nothing but their personal belongings and a small checking account. My mom was in shock as she told me all this. She kept saying she couldn't believe Ella would do this to them, that there must be some mistake. But deep down, I think she knew it was real. She ended the call by asking if she and my stepdad could stay with me while they figured things out. I didn't know how to respond. Part of me felt a twisted sense of satisfaction. The people who had kicked me out when I needed them most were now facing homelessness themselves. Felt like karmic justice. But another part of me was furious on their behalf. What Ella and her husband did was cruel and calculated. They had taken advantage of my stepdad's love and trust, manipulating him into giving up everything he had worked for. I told my mom I needed some time to think and that I'd call her back. After hanging up, I sat in stunned silence for a long time, trying to process everything I just learned. After much consideration, I made the difficult decision to say no to my mom's request. I explained that my tiny studio apartment barely had enough space for me and my cat. I simply couldn't accommodate 2 additional adults comfortably. I also expressed that I wasn't emotionally ready to live with them again after everything that had happened. I felt guilty saying no, but I knew it was the right decision for my own well-being. The past year had been about rebuilding my life and gaining independence, and I wasn't willing to jeopardize that progress. Instead, I offered to help them look for other housing options and reach out to extended family members who might be able to take them in. I also suggested they seek legal advice to see if there was any way to contest Ella's actions. The conversation was difficult, and I could hear the disappointment in my mom's voice, but I stood firm in my decision. As much as part of me wanted to help, I knew I couldn't set myself on fire to keep them warm. This situation has brought up a lot of complicated emotions, and I'm still processing everything. I hope that my mom and stepdad can find a solution, but I also know that I need to prioritize my own mental health and stability. It's a tough balance, but I believe I made the right choice for myself. Now on to the next story. Story 3. Found out my wife cheated on me with her AP she met at a convention, so I exposed both of them. My wife and I got married about 5 years ago. The two of us hit it off super well, and we always loved to do nerdy things together. She and I were both gamers. We loved anime and sharing our love of nerd culture with each other. She meant the world to me, and I always thought things were good. We fell in love really fast, about 3 years before we got married. In fact, I met her at a convention, and I thought that we would be a match made in heaven. We started off talking about our love for Legend of Zelda to even discussing the latest One Piece chapter. Some people look for the one their player to their everything. For me, that was her. We got married a little fast and had this really nerdy wedding where we even encouraged people to dress up. However, we didn't get a chance to go to conventions due to our jobs and how much they cost. We rarely had a chance to. However, I wanted to make our 5-year anniversary special. I didn't make a lot of money, but I made enough to take care of her. I surprised her for her birthday with tickets to one of the biggest comic cons out there. It was one that people dreamed of going to. She was ecstatic, and I was so excited to go. Now, I never did well with women. In fact, I could never really pick up when they actually liked me until after. It was only after the fact that I realized it. Even with my wife, it took me 3 long conversations on Discord to realize that she had the hots for me and wanted to get to know me better. When we went to the convention, things were great. A gal dressed as slave Princess Leia kept gushing over my stormtrooper costume that I put together at the last minute. After she left, my wife pulled me to the side, talking about how that gal was all over me. I told her I didn't even realize it. I was so bad about reading the room that I didn't pick up the signs. My wife was a little bit frustrated, but we continued on with our day. It was a 3-day invention after all. We went to this meetup, and that's when he came in. He was dressed as Han Solo. My wife, who was also dressed as Princess Leia, started talking to him. The two of them started talking a lot more, getting closer. I stepped in and mentioned I was the husband. The guy said it was nice to meet me but refused to make eye contact. After he left, I confronted my wife. She said there was nothing going on, and he was just a nice guy that liked my outfit. She was the bigger Star Wars fan, so naturally, she liked gushing out. I brushed it off, thinking it was nothing. The weekend continued. The next day, my wife woke up sick and exhausted. I said that I would go down and be back later on. I left, but part of me couldn't shake what happened the other night. I chalked it up to maybe my own imagination. However, my wife wasn't answering my messages. We still had one more day before the end of the convention. I bought her something to give to her after I got back up. When I approached the room, I heard sounds, moans, and such. I dismissed it, thinking it was maybe my wife. When I opened the door, I saw her there looking at me. It was clear she did something. I confronted her, but she said that there was nothing. I looked around trying to find someone, but there was nothing. I dismissed it. The convention passed. My wife grew distant. She worked longer hours and came home exhausted. I asked if she wanted to watch a movie together, but she would tell me that she was busy. I couldn't shake the moans that I heard. While my wife showered, I saw her Discord notifications were turned off. She never turned these off during the duration of our relationship, so something was amiss. I opened her phone, surprised that the passcode was the same, and I began to read them. They were messages from the guy that she met at the Star Wars meetup. He kept flirting with her, and they exchanged pictures. He even mentioned he wanted to roleplay with her, and she was all about it. I angrily set the phone down and pretended like I never saw anything. My wife asked me if anything was wrong, and I lied and said I was fine. However, it was not fine. I researched how to get a divorce. This would be quite hard to serve, but I wanted to humiliate her and show her that I knew everything. I told her about another convention and how I wasn't going to be able to make it to this one, but she could go. Her eyes lit up slightly, even though we wouldn't be together. This was my partner, someone that I wanted to be with forever, who just tossed me away. It was a gut punch, but I couldn't let her on. On the day of the convention, I followed my plan. I did some research on this guy. They actually worked pretty closely together. I went to the convention and found them, of course, right in front of her favorite voice actors. That's when my plan came in. I watched them get in line and hid behind them. I wore a mask to hide my face but watched them like a hawk. When they got closer, the voice actor asked her about how she was. She pulled the man closer and said she was having a great day. They shared a kiss, and then that's when I made my plan. I moved right in between them, pulling off the mask and looking directly at my wife. She dropped her hand and looked at me. She asked what I was doing. I argued with her, saying that I caught her with him, and that he cheated on me with him. She said that wasn't true, but I got the Discord messages, putting them right down on the table. The other attendees watched, shocked that I would even do something like this. However, I didn't want to let this go. I announced to everyone there that my wife was a cheater, and she cheated on me with this guy whom she also met at a convention. The celebrity stood up, said that he needed a break, and then disappeared. My wife's eyes filled with tears, and she begged me to listen to her. However, I couldn't. I told her that she lied to me, saying she was going alone. I told her that I knew about them meeting up, about the late nights at the office gaming with the girls. I called them one day and asked. They said they didn't hear a thing about a gaming night since they were busy preparing for the holidays. My wife stood there embarrassed. She told me that she wanted an open relationship and thought about asking me. I told her that I didn't want to listen to this. She was upset as well that I stepped in like that. However, I knew that she had messed up. We got home, and I grabbed my things, staying at a hotel. I grabbed all of my things and contacted an attorney so that we could get the paperwork ready to be filed. She tried to convince me to stay and that we should have an open relationship. She tried to say that I could sleep with other women, and she could sleep with men. I never wanted that. I wanted her. She was my player too, my everything. My actions got traction. Someone recorded me embarrassing my wife and showed it all over social media. I proceeded with the divorce and I got the house and all our things. I sold it though, because I didn't want to be reminded of the painful memories of the time we shared together. I don't know what happened to my wife. The nerd scene knew all about this, and it was a huge stink on Twitter and other places for a while. Her boss eventually found out because of what they saw, and I'm not sure if she stayed or not. Frankly, I don't care. My quest for love continues, but not with a cheating woman like her. Now on to the next story. Story 4. My ex-wife came back and demanding that I pay her child support. 7 years ago, I was married to my dear ex. We were together for 6 years. At this point, I thought we had a great relationship. Prior, I received a nice inheritance. I used the money, first, to buy a condo for us to live, a new car for her because hers was falling apart, as a thank you for her constant support over the years, and the rest went to starting my own company. I thought we loved each other. We had talked endless times about kids. We both wanted a family. One day, I came home from work. She was seated in the couch and signaled for me to seat with her. Then she told me she was pregnant. I was happy for like half a millisecond when I realized about the impossibility of this happening because we were both CIS women. I started to cry for what it meant. Then she started to cry and say sorry, but that this could be a good thing. Now, incredulously, I asked how on earth could this be a good thing. She said that this could be the perfect opportunity for us to have the family we always wanted. I didn't have the energy to argue at that moment, so I went to pack some things and told her I was going to be staying with my cousin for a few days and come back to talk. I was a complete disaster with my cousin for a week. Then I returned, said I wanted a divorce, packed all the rest of my things. While she tells me that she can't do it without me and that I'm abandoning our child. I said nothing. I couldn't speak. I didn't have it in me to do anything but pack and leave. In the divorce, I let her have the condo. Her C was on my name. She demanded alimony. I gave it to her for a year even though she wasn't really entitled to it. She demanded child support, but was denied for obvious reasons. A year later, it was done. A month before the divorce was finalized, I met a woman. I wasn't sure about dating, but my friends encouraged me to get back out there, so I did. It was slow. I told her about my past. She felt really bad for me. We went on dates, we kissed. Then she stopped responding my texts and calls for a week. I didn't know what was happening. She then shows up at my home looking sad. She tells me she's pregnant, to which I think, not again. But she quickly explains that she found out a few days ago. She had an appointment that day and was told she was about 16 weeks along, that she did not cheat since we had known each other for 3 months, that she knows this might be somehow triggering for me, that she really likes me but understands if I want nothing to do with her, and left. Ultimately, I couldn't let her go, and we stayed together. The whole ordeal was a bit confusing at first, but we worked it out. Now, my Capan is on the rise and it's been for years. We bought a house, got married, had 2 more kids, a dog, and a cat. Her family loves me, my family loves her. But then, last Saturday, my ex had to appear again. We are in a family gathering on my wife's side when she showed up to wife's aunt's house to expose me as a horrible person who abandoned her wife and child and left them with nothing to go start a new family with and raise someone else's child. And that's since I have money, I have to start paying the overdue child support and blah blah blah. Apparently, she befriended my wife's cousin's wife in PDA, told her about me. She gave my name and wife's cousin's wife was shocked and appalled by my actions and decided they were going to con me in the family gathering for everyone to hear and show them the evidence. My wife tried to argue back, but was cut by her aunt, cousin's mom, and in not a very nice way, kicked us out with a promise to take my treatment of my ex public and ruin my company. We left stunned, and my wife found she was going to start World War III if anyone dared to slander me. On Sunday morning we got a call from my wife's dad, aunt's brother, to talk about what the texts and voicemails they were writing were about. They didn't go to the gathering. We went over for lunch and explained everything that happened. They knew I got divorced in the past, but I never told them why. They were understanding of the situation, but my mother-in-law has said that, since I do have money, I should help my ex out, pay the child support, get her a place if she needs it, and be a parental figure in my ex's daughter's life. After all, the child was cons during your marriage. She has some odd spiritual beliefs. My wife is now mad at her mom for saying that. My wife's siblings are mostly on her side except who's close to cousin, and cousin believes his wife, and we've been ignoring the extended family. Update 1. Hi. Sorry I didn't update before. It's been hectic between my kids' routine changes with the school year ending, my wife, my business, and the situation with my ex. I haven't been able to even watch the last season of Succession. First, I want to clear some things. I saw a lot of people got fixated on the fact that I gave the condo to my ex. I get it, but in the moment I was just so low. I still had some love for her too, I guess, and I wanted to get rid of everything, so I thought, well, she will need a place for her and her child, and it will be faster to just give it to her, so I did, even against my lawyer's advice. My wife did not cheat on me. She slept with someone weeks before we even met. Then we met a month after that. We went on our first date 2 months into our relationship. She finds out she was pregnant. We talked and moved forward, but slowly. We didn't move in together the next day, we just stayed together to see how things would go. Could have ended at any time, but it didn't, and we moved in together when kid was almost a year old. Mill has some weird spiritual thing with some of her friends going on since forever. It never bothered me really, but I do think some of her views are questionable. I did mention to her that I gave my ex the condo. She said, "But you don't know if she still has it." Someone said that that's what she thinks because she cheated on Phil and my wife and her siblings may be a product of that. Honestly, I don't feel comfortable bringing that up with my wife right now, or anyone for that matter, so I won't do that. Okay, so a few things happened. I got all the documentation about the divorce. I made copies and hand them to my wife's family and made sure everyone could see the whole thing. I got some mixed reactions. There were people who told me they knew my ex was clearly crazy from the beginning and said next to nothing because they thought it was obvious, but that those who believed her were just as crazy, so talking to them would be like talking to a wall, so they just move on. They did apologize for not saying anything. They didn't think it could be so detrimental to me when it's clearly fake. I'm not mad at them now. With most of them, we're not exactly close, they're extended relatives. Others did believe my ex at first because she had evidence, but after showing them my documents, they apologized profusely and said they would support me suing her and be witnesses and such. And then there were those who still believe my ex, like cousin's wife, aunt, and a few others who are close to them that accuse me of falsifying documents. Bill, who's close to cousin, has said nothing about anything. He doesn't seem to be on their side, but did not admit he was wrong either, just silence from him. I filed a restraining order. The temporary one was denied, but I have a hearing schedule. I had a meeting with one of my biggest clients last week. We've known each other for a long time professionally, we're not friends, but he knew I got divorced years ago. When he arrived at the reception, I received him and asked him to follow me. He stopped me and said someone went to his office and told him about me abandoning a child and asked me if it was true. I said it was false, told him a brief recap and offered to show him my divorce documents. He said it was not needed, he trusts my word, and offered his help if I needed in the future. We moved on to our meeting. I was really pissed that she actually went for my business, but then something even worse happened. My lawyer has been drafting a cease and desist letter, and I was debating whether I should just sue her or wait for the letter. Then Saturday happened. I took my kids to the mall to buy some things for summer school. Classes are over, but their school still has some activities during the week, and there's a big event next weekend, and other things we needed to buy things for. We went and left my wife at home to relax. It's getting harder for her. When we came back, I gave the kids some bags and told them to go inside with them. Mama has a snack for them. I would handle the rest. I do a few trips in and out of the house, and when I'm finishing unloading the trunk, I hear Mommy. I turn around and there was a little girl standing there. I was confused. The girl seemed scared. Then I see my ex approaching. She tells the girl, yes, that's what she was supposed to be. The girl was still in silence for the rest of the exchange, but my ex went off on me. I'm paraphrasing here, but this is basically the exchange. Ex, I can't believe you wouldn't want to be in her life. She's an amazing kid. An innocent kid that did nothing wrong. You just abandoned her, and for what? For a random who sleeps with everyone, gets pregnant and then makes you responsible for her kid. Me. Wasn't it you who tried to do that? Ex. I was not a random chick. It was different. Me. Yeah, the difference is that she did not cheat on me and I chose to be responsible. She didn't try to force me. Ex. That doesn't make it fair. How could you not think of her? Points to the little girl, when you bring kids from the street and care for them, in reference to our 2 older kids being adopted. Your kids go to private school while I have to move for her to go to the school I want her to go to. Is she invisible to you? Me, are you nuts? Please leave. I don't have time for this. Ex, what? You don't want your perfect little family see who you really are. Me, you leave or I call the police. Ex, as if you would do that. Just be reasonable for once and we won't have any more problems. Then my wife came out of the housewife. I already called the police. They're on their way. I suggest you leave before they arrive. Me, come inside. I grabbed the last 2 bags and went inside. Through the window, I saw my ex grabbing the little girl by her arm rather harshly and drag her to her car. Then she left. Now I'm actually worried about the girl. The police showed up. We talked to them, showed them footage. We have cameras, even footage from my car. I filed again for a temporary restraining order and was approved, so that's good for now. I told my lawyer to forget about the letter. I'm suing her ass, and I can confirm she doesn't live in the condo anymore. I'm not sure what happened to it, or where she's living now, but we'll see. Update 2. Hello again. It's been a few weeks. Ex haven't showed up at my door again since last time. Thank the universe. She did, however, showed up at my office looking for me last Monday, but I wasn't there, as I'm now working mostly from home to help my wife who's in bed rest for the foreseeable future due to complications with the pregnancy. I went to the office on Thursday, and as I was leaving to go home, my ex's sister was waiting for me. We were close back then, but cut contact when the whole cheating happened and my therapist basically advised me to. Anyway, she said she has been coming for a few days and waiting outside hoping to see me, and she needed to talk to me and was really important. So we went to a cafe nearby and told me what my ex has been up to since the divorce. She sold the condo about 1.5 years after the divorce was finalized and moved to a house she's renting it. She said ex said it was a quick way to make money to buy all the stuff a kid would need growing up. As the time went on, her family saw a stranger, the normal behaviors in her. I'm not going to go into much detail, otherwise we'd be here a long time, but essentially she was diagonal noosed with bipolar disorder about 2 years ago and was treated for a bit, but then she stopped. I talked to my lawyer. He said that makes some things tricky, as she could defend not guilty by reason of insanity, but the fact she has been refusing treatment for a while now would help my case. Sister said that she's sorry for how ex is acting, and she would help me with whatever I need with the case. She's still around her sister to try and mitigate her episodes for the sake of her niece. I asked why CPS Hazen got involved, and she said her parents are butting in for that to not happen. I couldn't stay longer. I had to get home before my SIL had to leave, so we exchanged numbers and will be in contact if needed. That's all for now. I have the hearing for the permanent restraining order this week, so hopefully that goes well. Edit 'cause I forgot. Sister said ex let it slip that she's not sure who the biodad is 'cause she slept with 4 different people, 3 guys, around the time the kid was conceived. When I learned this, I felt even more stupid that she was just sleeping around and I had no clue. Update 3. Hi guys, sorry it's been so long. The youngest of our bunch was feeling excluded, always being in that same little room all the time, and she decided to come out earlier than expected. Mixed with the Nico stay in school starting, I feel like I would like to sleep into the next year, but thankfully everyone is doing great. Now on to my ex. The anxiety levels I was managing were off the charts back then. They are still high, but I can breathe. Basically, there was silence for about 2 weeks, and then I got a call that she attempted to cash out a fake check in my name. I have no idea how she found my bank, but just like the fertility clinic documents, the check was clearly fake and didn't fool the clerk. She was arrested immediately. Right now, she's in a psychiatric facility receiving treatment. I'm not sure how long she'll stay there, but once she's out, she's going to trial for check fraud, and from what I've been told, it doesn't look good for her. On the other hand, her parents are aware that I was planning to sue her and that I have evidence of another forgery crime committed by her. They begged me not to pursue them, since that would likely send their daughter away for longer. Maybe unpopular, but I made a deal with them that somehow they would make sure that everyone she defamed me to will know the truth. I don't want to deal with this right now, so I accept it. So far so good. In regards to the girl, I'm happy to say she's with my exl right now. I won't go into detail, but it seems that there's no way for my ex to get her back in the future. Even though it's not my business, I let my exl know that if her parents try to get the girl, I will help her with that. My wife and I are also taking some distance from my mother-in-law. It seems that my ex befriending the cousin was a coincidence that they both decided to use for their own advantages. The cousin and the aunt just used my ex's lies to get revenge on me, since apparently they work harder than me to make less money than me, and it's not fair. I don't think I'm forgetting anything, but let me know if I am. Now on to the next story. Story 5. My wife left my daughters behind during what she thought was a home invasion. My 34M wife 42F is a stay-at-home mom. Last week, when I was at work and my 2 oldest were at school, 5M and 3M, My wife was sitting at the dining room table when she saw a man walking down the driveway and going to the front door. He had what she thought was a hammer. She went to the front door and the guy was trying to get in. The guy saw her, waved, and tried to get in. She fled the house and ran out the back door. She left her cell phone and Apple Watch. She also left our twin girls, 8 months old. They were sleeping in their cribs. She ran through the neighborhood looking for someone to help her call police. Eventually, she found someone and they called the police. The police responded and cleared the house. Turns out it was a repair guy who was supposed to go to our neighbor's house and had been told that no one would be home and to just come in. She is mad at me for not being more supportive of her. I was stunned when she told me and was surprised when she said she left the girls. She is always yelling at me about how I don't do enough for the kids, unlike her who sacrifices constantly. I don't think that is accurate, but it is beside the point. We've been having major issues in our marriage for a long time. Apart from this, she is acting like this is one of the most traumatic events of her life, which is making me madder and madder. I am having a real hard time putting this one behind me. If this guy had been a bad guy, she would have abandoned our girls to him, also she could save herself. Our house isn't that big, and people in the neighborhood and online know we have 2 little girls. I honestly don't know what to do. Edit 1. This happened about a week ago. I spent about an hour in the phone with her the day trying to console her. I tried again that night and have been trying to take care of the kids and do all the chores at home. She has been focusing on what I think is a work-from-home job, but that she is lying to me about and trying to hide from me. Other than that, she is going out with her friends to bars. She does not believe in therapy and is refusing to go to marriage counseling that I set up for us online after the kids go to sleep. A big issue I having is the double standard that if I had done this she would have never forgiven me and probably divorced me. We had a fight because when we moved to a new house, my side of the bed was on the far side from the door and that I needed to be able to stop and attack her. I've been yelled at for abandoning my daughters when I take a shower in the morning before work and they begin crying, or if she is sleeping in and one begins crying while I'm changing the other's diaper and it takes me a minute to finish. I totally understand this is fight or flight and I'm not trying to Monday morning quarterback. I have not critiqued, let alone criticized her. The closest was when I was surprised when she told me she left the girls. Other than that call when I came home and she was annoyed that we don't have security cameras, we haven't really talked about it. Edit 2. She has a phone that worked. I texted her to check in and she told me to call her, and that's when I found out about this. When the kids are sleeping, she usually has it. It's a 1-story house. It's in L shape. The doors are at one end of the L and the kids are at the other end. I don't know how long it took for her to get help. It was in the work day and most of our neighbors work. It's a walkable neighborhood, not in the country somewhere. I am currently in therapy. She has mocked me in the past for going to therapy and uses that as a way to invalidate my opinions. What do you know, you're just a depression case. So there is no way she will see a therapist. The police had a social worker with them who gave her a card for a therapist. Update 1. Good afternoon, everyone. I wanted to thank everyone for all their comments and advice. I wanted to provide an update. Long story short, things are not going well. I feel like I am an airplane pilot who is trying to land a plane while it is disintegrating around me and that the time is now for me to bail out. I am also realizing how much I have normalized these issues and that my good days would be at best marginal days for other marriages but more likely would be awful. Since that post, I have really tried to do what I can to support her. I think I'd been doing what I could to support her in the past. Anytime she wants to leave, she can. I do the lion's share of the chores at home. That means laundry, cooking, groceries, and morning and bedtime routines for the boys who are school age. We do an informal system for dishes, and with the girls for the baths, it's close to 50-50 on that one. I also pay all the bills and handle all of the extracurriculars. One comment that people made was that she just gave birth 8 months ago and that I should be more sympathetic. I totally get that, but since she gave birth, she has done 4 10K races, a marathon relay, and goes to a run group and dinner afterwards twice a week. She has also gone to networking events for her business that she is working on. Since that post, we have had numerous issues. We have had more days with screaming matches than here is a list of issues since the post. She woke up early on Saturday, but didn't wake me or my son up for his early practice. I slept through my alarm, didn't do anything to help us get ready. Her only question when we came back was how late were we. The moment I came home, she went back to bed. I had all 4 kids by myself, which is fine. I took the kids to the store to run errands. As soon as I came back in, she got in a shower and left, and refused to take any kids despite their cries. She refused to tell us where she was going. Sunday, she refused to go to anyone's hockey practice because she had to clean the house. While I'm going to park at the rink with my kids crying, she calls me because she had hired a person to clean out our garage and wanted to know where we were going to move things. This was the first time I had heard of this. The woman did a good job of cleaning the garage, but she threw everything in the dumpster, including like unopened dress shirts. We had a thermonuclear fight on Monday. My eldest was screaming at me to get a second helping of dinner ready. I tried bluffing to send him to bed without the second helping. He goes straight to her and she overrules me. Once they leave the room, I explain what I was doing, and she spiked her laptop on the bed and jumps up and starts screaming at me. Proceeds to follow me out of the room and is screaming in front of all 4 kids that I am a whiny and not a real man and that I'm trying to starve her kids. Funnily enough, this was just before our marriage counseling session. I kept it, and while I was in the waiting room, she continued screaming at me and attacking my character. When the session started, she refused to join. She was puttering around and started blending something. I tried to be as objective as possible, and the counselor said that she was impressed with that. In the last 5 minutes, I tried to just bring my laptop to her. When I did, she collapsed into the room she was in like Superman seeing kryptonite. She refused to do it after that. I went to bed, and she woke me up and wanted me to set up our printer. We changed routers, and I hadn't had the chance to set it up yet. The lack of anger caught me off guard, and so I did it. She stood over my shoulder the whole time silently and refused to let me see anything. We had a couple of other fights along the same lane, but yesterday, Thanksgiving, we had a decent day. Not that it was overly affectionate, we just didn't fight. She slept in until 12:50 in the afternoon and was snippy because I didn't have everyone ready yet. She wanted the girls in the car seats. She then began a 90-minute shower and makeup routine and helped with the kids for maybe 20 minutes. We ended up an hour late for Thanksgiving dinner, but for us, that was a good day. Yeah, there was no affection or anything, and we didn't speak in the car, but yeah, my mind forgot all the issues we had been having, and I wanted to make it work. That night, I woke up and attended to one of the girls who is very sick. That is the one thing that she has done exclusively, is attend to the kids when they wake up. She has taken kids from me when I do get up before her. She says that it is because I'm working. One fight we had in September, she screamed at me as being selfish for taking my daughter and sitting with her. I had said that I didn't mind and that I was up anyway, and that became somehow me keeping her up because I couldn't sleep. The problem is that this has become a trump card in every argument. But anyway, I was with my daughter from 4 to 5 o'clock, and she slept in. This morning, I woke up at 9 o'clock, the latest I have slept in that I can remember. I started making the kids' breakfast and finishing the laundry. She was working on her laptop already. She snapped that I shouldn't bother cleaning the house because she has hired someone. I tired very, very hard and refused to escalate, but told her that we can't really afford a cleaning lady and that I've got it. She proceeded to call me a little and scream at me in my face in front of my kids. One of my boys ran and hid and the other sat and read on the couch, but he was not happy. She blamed me for not having time to clean and not having money and that I couldn't clean or do laundry to her standards, and that she wasn't a cleaner. It was about an hour of just constant abuse, so I spent today cleaning the house, doing laundry, and taking care of all 4 kids. My sons did more cleaning than she has for a month. What has really disturbed me is not the abuse towards me. I have normalized that and I'm used to it, and honestly, if she kept it behind closed doors, I was prepared to wait out the next 17 years and leave once my kids were out of the house. But my eldest son is clearly mirroring her behaviors and internalizing the stress. It doesn't help that she constantly wants me to ask him who is his favorite, who yells more, and who is the better parent. When I refuse to do that, I am scared of what he might say. I guess Reddit that I don't know what to do. I am trying to fix this. I am keeping an appointment scheduled with a counselor, but beyond that, other than talking to a lawyer, I don't know what I should do. She honestly doesn't see any issues with how she treats me. Her refrain is that, I am a diamond and if you leave me, you'll only be dating pebbles. Besides the fact that I don't want a divorce, and she spent the last 6 years threatening a divorce, I don't know. I can show anyone who is that out of touch with reality or seemingly so closed off from recognizing that they have a role in causing and fixing the problems with the marriage. Now on to the next story. Story 6. I refused to invite my sister to my wedding after she sabotaged my career, so my fiancé went behind my back and invited her anyway. I canceled the wedding, and now my whole family is against me. I, 32M, have been engaged to my fiancée, Sarah, 30F, for about 6 months now. We've been together for 4 years, and we're planning to get married next month. However, some recent events have thrown everything into chaos. Some background. I have a younger sister, Emily, 29, who I haven't spoken to in over 8 years. Growing up, Emily and I never got along. Our parents always tried to force us to be close, but we just clashed constantly. She was extremely competitive and always trying to one-up me in everything. It started when we were kids. I remember when I was 10 and Emily was 7, I won a spelling bee at school. My parents were so proud. They took us out for ice cream to celebrate. Emily threw a fit in the ice cream shop, screaming that it wasn't fair and that she could spell better than me. She demanded that our parents quiz her right there in the shop to prove it. It was mortifying. As we got older, things only got worse. If I got an A on a test, she'd study for days to get an A+. If I made the soccer team, she'd suddenly develop an interest in soccer and try out too. When I started dating in high school, Emily would try to flirt with any girl I was interested in. It was exhausting and made me dread coming home most days. Our parents tried to intervene, but nothing seemed to work. They sent us to family therapy when I was 16 and Emily was 13, but Emily refused to participate, just sitting silently through the sessions. The therapist eventually told our parents that she couldn't help if Emily wasn't willing to engage. Things came to a head when we were in our early 20s. I had just graduated college and landed my dream job at a prestigious tech company. It was an incredible opportunity. Great salary, amazing benefits, and a chance to work on cutting-edge projects. I was over the moon. Emily was still in college at the time, struggling to figure out her career path. She changed majors 3 times already and was on academic probation. When I told my family about the job offer over dinner, Emily completely lost it. She started screaming at me, accusing me of always overshadowing her and ruining her life. She said things like, "You always have to be the golden child, don't you? And why don't you just die so I can finally have a chance to shine?" My parents tried to calm her down, but she was inconsolable. She stormed out of the house, slamming the door so hard a picture fell off the wall. And later that night, I overheard Emily on the phone with one of her friends saying she was going to get revenge on me and knock me down a peg. I didn't think much of it at the time. Emily had always been dramatic and made empty threats when she was upset. But a few days later, as I was getting ready to start my new job, I got a call from HR saying they were rescinding the offer. Apparently, someone had sent them a bunch of fake emails from an account in my name filled with racist and sexist comments. There were also fake social media posts they'd been sent showing me saying horrible things. I was devastated and knew immediately it had to be Emily's doing. She was the only one who had the motive and who knew enough details about my new job to pull this off. When I confronted her, she denied it at first, but eventually, she broke down and admitted she had created the fake accounts to sabotage my job offer. She said she just wanted me to fail at something for once, and that she was tired of living in my shadow. She seemed almost proud of what she'd done, like she'd finally beaten me at something. I was furious and heartbroken that my own sister would do something so cruel. This wasn't just sibling rivalry anymore. She had actively tried to destroy my career and reputation. I told her I never wanted to see or speak to her again and moved out that same day. I crashed on a friend's couch for a few weeks while I figured out my next steps. In the 8 years since then, I've had zero contact with Emily. My parents still see her occasionally, but they know better than to bring her up around me. Took a lot of work to rebuild my career after that setback. I had to take a much lower-paying job at first and slowly work my way back up, but I've worked hard to build a good life for myself. I now have a great career at another tech company, amazing friends, and of course Sarah. I met Sarah about 4 years ago through a mutual friend. We hit it off immediately. She was smart, funny, and incredibly kind. On our third date, I opened up to her about the situation with Emily. Sarah was sympathetic and understanding, saying that family can be complicated and that she respected my decision to cut contact. When Sarah and I got engaged 6 months ago, I made it very clear that Emily was not to be invited to the wedding under any circumstances. Sarah seemed understanding at first, but as we got deeper into the wedding planning, she started pushing back. She kept saying things like, "But she's your sister, and don't you think it's time to forgive and move on?" I shut it down every time, telling Sarah this wasn't up for discussion. I explained that having her there would ruin what's supposed to be the happiest day of our lives. Just the thought of seeing her makes my stomach churn. Sarah would usually drop it after I explained, but I could tell she wasn't happy about it. Last week, Sarah and I had a huge fight about it. We were going over the guest list when she brought up Emily again. This time, she wouldn't let it go. She accused me of being stubborn and said I was punishing Emily for a mistake she made years ago. I tried explaining again how much Emily's betrayal had hurt me, but Sarah just wasn't getting it. She even had the nerve to suggest that maybe Emily had changed and deserved another chance. I asked her how she'd feel if someone had deliberately tried to ruin her career and reputation. Sarah said she'd be hurt too, but that family was too important to cut off forever. I lost my temper at that point. I told Sarah that Emily wasn't just family. She was someone who had tried to destroy my life out of pure jealousy and spite. I said that if Sarah couldn't respect my feelings on this, maybe we needed to rethink getting married. Sarah looked shocked. I don't think she expected me to push back so hard. I told her point blank that if she invited Emily behind my back, the wedding was off. Things have been tense between us ever since. Sarah's been giving me the cold shoulder and making passive-aggressive comments. Some of our mutual friends have taken her side, saying I'm being unreasonable and that weddings are about bringing families together. But they don't understand the depth of hurt and betrayal I've experienced. I love Sarah, and the thought of calling off the wedding breaks my heart. But I also can't imagine having to see Emily on what's supposed to be the happiest day of my life. Just thinking about her being there makes me feel sick to my stomach. So, Reddit AITA for refusing to budge on this? Should I just give in to keep the peace or stand my ground, even if it means potentially losing Sarah? I'm really torn and could use some outside perspective. Date 1. It's been about a week since my original post, and a lot has happened. First, I want to thank everyone for their input and advice. Reading through the comments really helped me gain some clarity on the situation. The day after I made the post, Sarah and I had another big argument about Emily. She kept insisting that family is important and that I should at least consider inviting Emily to the wedding. I stood my ground and told her again that this was a firm boundary for me. Sarah then dropped a bombshell. She admitted that she had already reached out to Emily behind my back. Apparently, Sarah had found Emily on social media a few months ago and had been messaging her regularly. She claimed she just wanted to understand the situation better, but I felt completely betrayed. I asked Sarah point blank if she had already invited Emily to the wedding. She hesitated before admitting that, yes, she had told Emily she was welcome to come. I was furious. I told Sarah that by going behind my back like this, she had broken my trust in a major way. She tried to defend herself, saying she thought she was doing the right thing, but I wasn't having it. I told her the wedding was off and asked her to move out of our apartment. Sarah was shocked. I don't think she expected me to actually follow through on canceling the wedding. She started crying and begging me to reconsider, saying she loved me and had only been trying to help. But for me, the trust was broken. I helped her pack up some essentials, and she's been staying with a friend for the past few days. In the meantime, I've been dealing with the fallout of canceling a wedding on short notice. Most of our friends and family have been understanding once I explained the situation, but Sarah's family is furious with me. Her mom called me a heartless monster for throwing away our relationship over petty sibling drama. Sarah's brother, who I used to be close with, sent me a long text telling me I was making the biggest mistake of my life. What's been hardest is that I truly do love Sarah. We've built a life together over the past 4 years, and I thought she was the one. We had so many plans for the future. We talked about buying a house next year, starting a family in a few years. Now all of that is gone. I've been replaying our relationship in my head, wondering if there were signs I missed. Sarah always knew how I felt about Emily, but she would occasionally make comments about how sad it was that we didn't speak. I always shut those conversations down quickly. Maybe if I had been more open to discussing it, things wouldn't have gotten to this point. But then I remind myself that Sarah knew how important this was to me and chose to disregard my feelings anyway. I've also had to deal with Emily trying to contact me. She sent me a long email apologizing for her past actions and saying she hopes we can reconcile. She wrote about how much she's changed, how she's been in therapy for years working on her issues. Part of me is curious to hear her out, but a bigger part knows that reopening that door would only lead to more pain. I haven't responded and don't plan to. My parents have been calling nonstop, begging me to reconsider. They say that this could be a chance for the whole family to heal, but they don't seem to understand how deep this hurt goes. They've always tried to downplay the rivalry between Emily and me, acting like it was just normal sibling stuff, but what Emily did went far, far beyond normal sibling rivalry. For now, I'm focusing on taking care of myself. I've thrown myself into work and have been spending a lot of time with friends. It's not easy. I keep expecting to see Sarah when I come home or wake up, reaching for her in bed, but I know I made the right choice in standing up for myself. I deserve a partner who respects my boundaries and doesn't try to force a relationship with someone who hurt me so deeply. I'm not sure what the future holds. Part of me hopes that Sarah will realize how wrong she was and come apologize. But even if she did, I'm not sure I could trust her again. For now, I'm taking it one day at a time and trying to rebuild my life. Update 2. It's been about a month since my last update. Things have settled down somewhat, but there have been some new developments I wanted to share. Sarah moved the last of her things out of our apartment last week. It was a difficult day. We both got emotional as we said our final goodbyes. Despite there's still a lot of love there, but I know ending things was the right call. Sarah admitted that she realizes now how wrong it was to go behind my back. But the trust has been broken. As she was leaving, Sarah told me that she hopes someday I'll be able to forgive both her and Emily. She said that holding on to anger only hurts myself in the long run. I know she meant well, but it felt like she still wasn't really hearing me. This isn't about anger or holding grudges. It's about protecting myself from people who have hurt me deeply. I've had to block Emily's number and email address. After my last update, she started bombarding me with messages. Some were apologetic. Others were angry and accusatory. In one particularly nasty email, she said that I was punishing everyone else for my own inability to move on. It was clear she still hasn't dealt with her own issues. I feel confident in my decision to keep her out of my life. The hardest part has been dealing with my parents. They're upset that I canceled the wedding and keep trying to convince me to reconcile with both Sarah and Emily. Last weekend, they invited me over for dinner. When I got there, I found out they had invited Emily, too, hoping to force a reconciliation. I left immediately and haven't spoken to them since. I'm hurt that my parents would ambush me like that. They know how I feel about the situation with Emily, yet they chose to disregard my feelings completely. It's bringing up a lot of old resentments about how they handled things when we were kids. They always tried to force us to get along instead of addressing the real issues. On a more positive note, I've started seeing someone new. It's very casual right now, but it feels good to be moving forward. Her name is Rachel, and we met at a friend's barbecue. She knows about my family situation and has been really understanding and supportive. It's refreshing to be with someone who respects my boundaries without question. I'm also throwing myself into new hobbies and interests. I've taken up rock climbing and have been going to the gym 3 to 4 times a week. It's a great way to work out my frustrations and clear my head. I've also been learning to cook. I realized I had relied on Sarah for most of our meals and needed to learn to fend for myself. It's been fun experimenting with new recipes and techniques. Work has been a good distraction, too. I've taken on some new projects that are challenging but rewarding. My boss has been really understanding about everything and has given me some flexibility with my schedule as I deal with all of this. I still have moments where I miss Sarah and our life together. The other day, I came across an old photo of us on vacation last year. For a moment, I was tempted to call her, but then I reminded myself why things ended and why it's better this way. As for Emily, I still have no desire to reconcile. Some people have suggested that I should at least hear her out, see if she's really changed, but I'm not willing to risk opening myself up to that pain again. Maybe someday, far in the future, I'll feel differently, but for now, I'm at peace with my decision. Overall, while this has been an incredibly difficult time, I feel like I'm coming out the other side stronger. I'm proud of myself for standing my ground and not compromising on my principles. I know there will still be tough days ahead, but I'm cautiously optimistic about the future. Now on to the next story. Story 7. Ex-wife is back in my life after I initiated our divorce years ago due to issues with her family. Now I'm wondering if we should give it another chance. Background. We have been in a relationship for 5 years and living together for 4. And this is the best, most satisfying relationship I've had in all my life. She works in the healthcare industry, and her kindness towards those in need and less privileged than her is what drew me to ask her out in the first place. In the last 4 years between us, there have been some little fights and only one big fight. The fight happened in October 2014. She planned for a lunch with Carl, which I had to miss because of work-related emergency. He called me later that night saying that I don't show him the respect he deserves and I'm always trying to get out of family events because I don't want to be around him, which is not true, because half of the planning and organizing on his birthday was on me, and it was a big event. In the morning, I told GF about his call, and she brushed it off as him being intoxicated. The next weekend, when we went to her parents' place for family dinner, Carl was extremely hostile towards me, but I kept silent about it until he said that I should not have missed the lunch. Every other Sunday is family dinner at her folks' place, and I rarely miss it, so I didn't think it was a big deal. I apologized to him and said that I would make up for it in some way. At the next dinner, I bought a bunch of smart wearable accessories for him because GF suggested he was interested in them. He refused to accept the gift, and when I insisted, he walked out, saying he needs some air. I had no clue what was going on, and GF's mom was mortified, apologizing to me over and over again for Carl's behavior. When we got home, I asked GF if there was something going on which she was not telling me. At first she tried to brush it off, but then she said that it was my fault for not seeing that her father was not interested in being buddies, and wanted my respect, not friendship. This was a complete surprise to me because I never really thought of him as anything more than her father. We would just watch the game together sometimes and chat about it later, but that was the extent of our social interaction. GF said I needed to earn his respect, and I told her I had done nothing wrong. That's when the fight started, but a few days later, Carl called me and said he liked the watch and other accessories. That's his way of declaring truths, I guess. After that, I was always extra careful never to miss any event with him. Last June, GF's mother died, and it was an incredibly difficult time for everyone. I tried to be as supportive towards the whole family as I could. I cut down my work hours to spend more time with them. GF and I started cooking the family dinner at his place because she thought it would be better for him to see the house alive with people again, and we made it an every-week event for a while just to spend more time with him. Multiple times we made extra effort to host family events, and once we even flew his elder sister over for his birthday. I had thought he would warm up to me a little, but I guess I was wrong, which brings us to today. GF is away for the week on work-related stuff, so I planned the whole proposal. I was going to decorate our apartment like a planetarium with stars and planets and write, "Will you marry me in the stars?" This is from Friends, which she is obsessed with. I wanted to start the preparations with his blessing because that way he would feel good about me asking him first and he'd feel included. Also, I planned a lunch with him for today to ask for his blessing. I told him how much respect I had for him and that I wish one day I could be as good a father as he was. Then, when I asked for his blessing for the marriage, he blew up. He was absolutely livid, saying that her daughter deserves a better man and that he never really liked me much and had always hoped the relationship would end. He said all the ass-kissing I was doing last year had showed that I just wanted to appear like a good man to GF and didn't mean any of that. I was so shocked because this is not how I expected it to go at all. I left him still spewing hate and went to one of my friends' place, told him and his wife everything, but they are just as shocked as I am. I spent the day at their place and got home about 2 hours ago, not sure how to proceed now or even what to do. Should I tell GF that her father said no? Should I act as if nothing has happened? For now, I'm drinking and playing video games. What should I do, Reddit? Note: I've kept a lot of details intentionally vague because GF and her siblings are active on Reddit. Update 1. I am trapped in a marriage I think is one-sided and I need advice. I'm not sure what I will get out of this. I feel like writing it all down and having a stranger over it might give me some mental clarity. But I think at this point there's no way to salvage our marriage. Also, English is not my native language, so apologies for any errors which cause misunderstandings. I've been in a relationship with my wife for almost 9 years now, married for 2. Our relationship has been, for the most part, a fulfilling and satisfying one for the both of us. It seems like I'm making a self-congratulating post, but we've become better people by virtue of being together. I'm an old-fashioned person, so it was difficult to meet a woman who liked the things I liked and had the opinions I had. The only unsavory part of our relationship over the years has been my relationship with my father-in-law. My wife and I rarely have disagreements, so most of the major fights we've had were because of her father. I want to be clear here, I don't hate him. I respect the guy. He sacrificed a lot in his personal life in order to provide for his family and to make sure my wife was raised with love and care. I used to look up to him in the earlier years of the relationship. He and my mother-in-law would host the family twice every week, and when I first started dating their daughter, it took me by surprise how close they were as a family. I really liked the family events with these picturesque dinners of mild conflicts and contentment with how close my wife was with all her siblings and her parents too. Early on in the relationship, I think I freaked out my wife by how much I enjoyed being at her parents' house. Her mother was a saint of a woman who gave me so much love from the get-go. She would always make sure I was included in family activities and often reserved a seat for me at the family dinner right next to her, talking to me like I was one of her own. I remember one time I was over at their place and had to get back to the city for work. It was getting pretty late when I got up to leave, and it had been snowing. She came down from her room when I was leaving with an overcoat of her husband, saying I should take the coat with me just in case. But I know it was because she knew my car got cold those days. It was a poser getting to the end of its life. She didn't want me to feel like she thought less of me just because I made less money than my wife. These little mom things she would do made me love her so much. Anyway, the reason I bring up my mother-in-law is because I think she was the reason her husband was accepting of me at the time. She died 4 years ago, and it somehow changed him. I think his love meter broke or something. He started acting like I'd somehow slighted him all the time, like one time wife and I were bringing over some groceries and restocking everything, and I thought it would be nice to stay for the dinner and cook for him while he was out for his evening walk. Wife and I prepared a nice dinner. At dinner, he thanked my wife for it. She mentioned that I did most of the work for it, and he kind of looked at me and just stopped talking. Another time in September of 2016, we were staying at his place for the weekend because we were cooking the family dinner. Early morning, wife and I were sitting on the breakfast counter just starting our day, and we thought he was out because he was usually the first one up. I hit my wife on her leg over a stupid pun or something, and I guess he saw because he came over and started yelling at me about not being raised right and being a woman beater. He said a lot of extremely toxic things about me before my younger sister-in-law came into the kitchen and practically dragged him out. My wife repeatedly said that it was a joke, but he wouldn't accept the explanation, saying she sticks up for me. Similarly, I remember one time, this was when his wife was alive, I bought him a gift, and he straight up refused to accept it in front of the whole family. My wife's mother, brother, and his family, including sister-in-law, both sisters, their husbands, and the elder sister's kid were there. It was such a humiliating experience for me. I just wanted the man to not hate me all the time. I think my mother-in-law forced him to accept the gift after a few days and made him apologize to me. After my mother-in-law died, he changed. It was like his filter was gone. He would stay in his room a lot, only come out for his errands and walks. He wouldn't watch the games with me, saying I talk too much. He wouldn't let me fix anything at the house despite me practically living there and having done a lot of work in the house in the past. A popular theory among my friends was that he hated me because I was too close to his wife, which sounds so absurd. She was a maternal figure in my life, and I can't for the life of me understand why that would piss him off. She was nice to everyone. My wife is nice to everyone too, to the point of it being a fault. My mother-in-law used to say that she had 4 sons, her son, two husbands of my wife's sisters, and me, so it's not like I was inappropriately close with the woman. I've discussed this with my wife a lot too, but she is always insistent that my relationship with her mother has nothing to do with it. My wife is the youngest daughter, so she treats her father with a lot of love and respect. Early on in our relationship, his behavior wasn't an issue, and by the time it became an issue, we were already too serious for me to break it off over this. Everyone else in her family likes me as far as I know. I've been invited over by both of her sisters at multiple times for lunches, SL dinners, SL favors, etc. Everyone treats me like a family. I've talked to the eldest sister about why their father hates me, but she's always maintained that he doesn't hate me. She says he loves his youngest daughter a lot and has always been a difficult person to please, and honestly, I can see that it's true. On an average day, he is most tolerant of me out of all his sons-in-law, but they all live in different cities or states, and wife and I live in the same neighborhood, so he gets to see me more. I'm sure a part of his resentment is because of that too. After my mother-in-law died, we were all heartbroken. A few days after her funeral, when everyone was starting to leave, my wife and I were going through some of the stuff that her mother left her. She started getting choked up about the fact that the house felt like it had died with her. We decided that we were going to take on the mantle of cooking for family dinners like her mom used to do. It's a pretty big responsibility considering the family is almost never all together, except maybe one holiday a year. Sometimes it would just be my father-in-law, brother-in-law, and his family, and us. It was actually really nice for a while. Everyone kept visiting once in a while, and the routine was nice. I was glad to have more time for family and not being harassed by father-in-law. Felt like he was warming up to me at that time. Wife and I started talking about marriage, and it just felt right. I don't think I was ever more sure about anything than about marrying my wife at that time. There was a brief moment before the engagement where she and I got into a fight, but things worked out nicely. We got engaged in May, and it just set things in motion. My wife is the youngest child in her family, so she got a lot of positive attention from her siblings. They had kept her mother's wedding accessories for her, which honestly was such a nice thing to do, and slowly over the months, it became this big and happy event in our family. Winter of 2016, when we got married, my wife sat me down and asked me if it would be okay to move in back with her father to take care of him. I think that was the moment where I made the stupidest decision of my life when I said yes. I was blinded by love, not just for my wife, but for her family, for her mother who I missed so much, for her father who liked me but never really accepted me, and for her siblings who liked me like I was their own. I just thought about what would be best for everyone else. A month after we moved in, my father-in-law asked his son if he could come stay with him for a while. At the time, it felt like a good thing that he was moving past the grief of his wife's death, but I don't think that was why he visited his son. He just wanted to get out of the house because of me. A few weeks later, when he got back, his passive-aggressive started again, but this time it was just constant nagging over small petty things. I moved the chair, no I didn't. I broke the thermostat, no, and I changed it for good measure. I forgot to put the tools back. I messed up the library. Things like that, almost if I'm a child who's unwanted in this house. May 2017, we had a huge fight, and I gave my wife a choice to either live with me or live with her father. That made her have a fight with her father, and she decided she was going to move out because, in her own words, he is never going to accept you as his son. He's delusional in grief, so we moved out, but still lived close by because both our jobs were quite close. Our moving out, however, messed up the whole family dinner tradition as her father refused to come to our place for dinners, and we couldn't afford to host the whole family in our small apartment. It became a logistic nightmare, so her brother stepped up and said he was going to do it. I think their father was really mad at me for ruining the tradition because at every single dinner I had with him, he wanted nothing to do with me. I actually liked it this way because it was nice to not be attacked or defended all the time, but my wife started resenting me for it, and I think her younger sister and brother do too. It's been almost 2 years since we moved out. I don't attend family dinners with much regularity, maybe once a month if I'm being generous. I also got busier at work, so I've been spending less time with wife during the weekdays, which I prefer because her resentment towards me is making it a very difficult situation. She goes over to her brother's house every other weekend, and the other weekend is spent at her father's place, where her brother's family and she get together for dinner. The only person on my side is my older sister-in-law because she thinks her father has treated me badly. She has visited us twice over the last year, and it's the only time I've gotten any affection from my in-laws. It feels like up until 2 years ago, I had a huge family who all loved me, and now I'm getting more and more lonely by the month. I can't help but feel that the marriage has changed our lives for the worse. It's been more than 2 months since my wife and I have been intimate in our bedroom. It's been a lot longer since we've had a date for ourselves. I am at a complete loss as to what I can do to improve things. This post kind of grew when I was writing it. I had to edit some small details because I don't want my in-laws to find this post on Reddit and be hurt by what I've written. Update 2. I decided to go ahead and initiate divorce because I do not want to be in this relationship anymore. Some folks have messaged me asking for an update, so I thought I could post it here instead of personal messages. I've been reading a lot of relationship help books and tried to talk to my wife many times. However, the fact is, she and I just don't work as a couple anymore. I am no longer a priority in her life, and I am not okay with it. So last month, I decided to talk to my lawyer and initiate divorce. It's been a really stressful time, especially from almost all of her family, but at this point, I just want to look after myself and recover myself from this relationship. The folks at /r/dead bedrooms have been helpful as well. I read through so many posts there which kind of opened my eyes to the nature of my marriage. Once again, thank you for people who helped me in my previous posts. My ex-wife, F33, and I am 35, recently reconnected after she went through a bad breakup. Is it bad that I want to get back together with my ex-wife because of how lonely I am? There's some context to why we got divorced, but it will take too long to explain here. The summary is that I could not get along with her family, and mostly her father, and that made my marriage an unhappy place for me. Her father always hated me and at one point told me that my ex-wife deserved better than me. If you want to read about my relationship with him, it is in the previous posts. I am not sure if I'm allowed to provide links, but after our divorce, I lost a lot of family and friends. I was very involved with family on her side, and losing them all at the same time because we got divorced made things difficult for me. I am an immigrant here, so I did not have many friends outside of my ex-wife's family. During the divorce process, the co-lockdown started, and that killed all my relationships with her side of the family, and I was really lonely here for a long time. I tried to go on dates, but the dating culture is so different now than 15 years ago. I could not find a person I wanted to spend more time with, but I think it was in part my fault too. And the one person who showed interest in long-term dating, she was much younger than me. I did not like her friends, and her friends were not thrilled with me either, so that relationship kind of died in 2021. Since then, I have stopped going on dates even, and I have lost touch with some friends and acquaintances because of or maybe because of age and not having a wife, like they are all family men now, so making time is a difficult thing. But anyway, I saw my ex-wife a few times in the last 2 years, and we exchanged some quick words about well-being but nothing substantial. I knew she lost her father due to and I told her I was sorry for her loss because he loved her very much. She also told me she was dating a younger man, and it was going well. However, we never sat down for tea or anything. It just never happened. But 2 months ago, I got a message from her saying she wanted to meet for lunch. During this lunch, she told me her relationship of 1 year and some months was not going well, and she was thinking of breaking up with her boyfriend. She and him did not agree on kids or not having kids, and she did not see a future with him. We kept in touch through the last 2 months, and 12 days ago, she broke up with him. She told me a part of the reason was that after talking to me, she remembered how it was with me when we first started dating and how it was not the same with her boyfriend. She and I have been talking a lot in the last few weeks since the breakup. The first thing she does after waking up every morning is message me, and then 2 days ago, she called at 7 o'clock in the morning saying she was at my door with some food. I had been feeling ill, but I don't remember when I told her. However, she came with a lot of home-cooked food and soups which she knows I like. Felt like we were back in time 10 years ago. It's been a very confusing time since then. I am not sure what I feel. I think I am starting to love her again. She pays me so much attention, which is nice. She also keeps sending food or bringing it herself, and then last night she spent the night because I was too ill to get up and clean after myself. Nothing happened between us, but at the same time, I think she wants to talk about us dating again maybe, and I will admit all the attention and food and other gestures of love and care are starting to feel incredible. I am not sure who to talk to about this. I think I need to keep her away for a few days to be able to think clearly, but it has been so long since I have felt this good about myself, and a lot of our relationship problems were from how her father acted with me, so I keep thinking maybe we can try again, and this time it will be better. Any advice or anyone wants to talk to help me think here, I would really appreciate it. Update 3. My ex-wife, F33, and I am 35, recently reconnected after she went through a bad breakup. Is it bad that I want to get back together with my ex-wife because of how lonely I am? As for the update, it is a mixed bag. On Saturday, she came over to talk about our relationship and what we both wanted, what went wrong, etc. She asked to speak first, and I really should have talked first instead, but I let her say her part, and it was focused on her relationship with her whole family, how important her father was to her, how much involved everyone else was in her relationship with me. She said sorry for letting her family, and her father in particular, meddle in our marriage. One of the things which hurt me a lot was when she mentioned that her ex-boyfriend never wanted to be around her family and hated going to any family events or even to a simple dinner, and as she said, that's when she realized how much easier I had made things for her in our marriage. It was incredibly hurtful because I remember telling her in so many different ways and at many times, even before the death of her mother, that I was okay with her family's involvement, but she needed to keep some distance between our relationship and her father in particular. She said that one time her father said something nasty directed at her ex-boyfriend, and after that time he refused to be in the same room as him, and I told her that he was right in doing that. I reminded her of the time when her father told me after 5 years of our relationship that he did not want to give me blessing for asking you to marry. I don't know why, but hearing her say that she saw her family's behavior towards her boyfriend, and that was what helped her see how nosy they can be, was really hurtful. Like my feelings and my protest did not matter to her as much. I told her that, and she had tears in her eyes. She said sorry a lot of times about it. She said she was young and inexperienced at first, and then after her mother died, she was scared of losing her father, and anything I said about him was difficult for her to hear because of that. I remember one time we were hosting the family dinner, and her father said hurtful things about my cooking, and I brought it up with her and one of her siblings, and she refused to hear me even when her sister told her she should listen because I was right. Anyway, when we got talking about her father, the conversation kind of got away from me. We ended up talking about him for like 2 hours. I think she wanted to get a lot of it off her chest too. It was very emotional and exhausting though, as afterwards I did not have the energy to continue talking. I really wish I had talked first because I wanted to talk to her about our problems in the bedroom as well, but we had to make food first. She was saying how much she missed cooking with me and being around each other. I guess that's another thing her ex-boyfriend did not appreciate about her. After making lunch together, we just sat eating and talking about the few times we had some time for ourselves when we were married. She mentioned how much she liked going on 2 road trips we took together after we got married. For context, we used to have a lot more time when we first started dating as we were still studying, but then after getting jobs and having to take care of a house, it slowly diminished. After we finished lunch, I was too tired to continue our conversation, so we just kind of existed around each other for a little bit. We did talk about what we should not expect if we started dating. I told her I want to talk about our bedroom problems, but maybe not right away. She told me she wanted to say sorry for not listening to me about that too. She was a very selfish lover, and she told me it was a difficult thing for her to realize that she had ignored my needs in the marriage. She said if we date again, she wants us to see a relationship counselor together and by herself to make our dating life better. I think it is a good idea to talk to someone who can help me explain my side of things to her. I am not confident how helpful the conversation can be if it is just the two of us. She has a tendency to talk over me or to agree with me but not let me say my part. I want to talk to her about it too, but I think it's better if I wait until we have found some relationship counselor. But still, I think the outcome of the conversation yesterday was good. I want to ask her out on a date tonight for maybe Tuesday or Wednesday. She went back to her house last night, and I missed her presence around me a lot. I don't know if that is a good sign or if it means I am too lonely. When she was here yesterday, she got a call from one of her siblings, and she mentioned me by name. I was not listening in, but I just heard her say my name, so my ears picked up on that part. I feel like that should be a good sign too, Or maybe I am just desperate to look for anything positive, as I take that as a sign. She wanted to come over today, but I told her I am feeling much better, and she doesn't need to cook for me today. Also, I spent the morning today looking through our old pictures together. It was nice to remember the person she used to be. I feel like yesterday I saw a little bit of that person in her. Am I wrong to want to start something so soon? I know I said previously that I would wait, but waiting for the sake of it seems pointless. I do want to take things slow because I want us to find a relationship counselor soon, but I am afraid I will lose her if I show no interest. Now on to the next story. Story 8. My neighbor's dog won't stop pooping in my garden, and when I complain about it to him, he does something which is beyond anything I have ever seen. It all started with me, 52M, about 6 months ago when my new neighbors moved in next door. They seemed nice enough at first. A young couple, John, 37M, and Elena, 35F, with 2 kids and a dog. We exchanged pleasantries over the fence and even had them over for a barbecue shortly after they arrived. Everything was going great until their dog started using my garden as its personal toilet. Now, I've lived in this house for over 15 years. It was the first home I bought after getting married, and though my wife passed away 5 years ago, I've stayed here because of the memories we shared. The garden was her pride and joy, and I've maintained it in her honor ever since. It's not just a patch of grass to me. It's a living memorial to the love of my life. I'm not unreasonable when it comes to neighborhood issues. I understand that accidents happen, especially with pets. The first couple of times I noticed dog poop in my garden, I didn't think much of it. I figured maybe the dog had gotten loose or the owners hadn't noticed. But as the weeks went by, it became clear this was a regular occurrence. I decided to approach my neighbors about it. I knocked on their door one Saturday morning and politely explained the situation. Elena answered and seemed genuinely apologetic. She promised they'd keep a closer eye on their dog, Max, and make sure he didn't get into my yard anymore. We chatted for a bit, and she mentioned they'd moved here from the city for a quiet, better life. I thought I understood. After all, I'd done the same thing years ago with my late wife. For a while things improved, but after about a week, I started finding poop in my garden again. This time, I was a bit more frustrated. I spent a lot of time and effort maintaining my garden, and constantly having to clean up after someone else's dog was getting old fast. It wasn't just about the inconvenience. Every time I had to clean up after Max, it felt like a small desecration of the space I shared with my wife. I went over to talk to them again, this time catching John as he was leaving for work. He seemed less understanding than Elena had been. He mumbled something about how it was just a bit of dog poop, and I was making a big deal out of nothing. I tried to explain how it was affecting my garden and what the garden meant to me, but he just waved me off and drove away. His dismissive attitude reminded me of my own father, who never took my concerns seriously when I was growing up. It hit a nerve I didn't even know I had. At this point, I was getting pretty annoyed. I decided to install a small fence around my garden to keep Max out. It wasn't anything fancy, just a simple wooden fence about 3 feet high. I thought this would solve the problem once and for all. As I was putting it up, I remembered how my wife and I had talked about doing this years ago but never got around to it. It felt bittersweet to finally be doing it without her. Boy, was I wrong about the fence solving the problem. A few days after putting it up, I came home from work to find it knocked over, and, you guessed it, more dog poop in my garden. I was furious. I stormed over to my neighbor's house and rang the doorbell repeatedly until John answered. I'll admit I lost my cool a bit. I started yelling about how inconsiderate they were being and how I was sick of cleaning up after their dog. I told him about my wife, about what the garden meant to me, and how his lack of respect was like trampling on her memory. John yelled back, saying I was being a terrible neighbor and that if I didn't like living next to dogs, I should move to a retirement community. His words stung. I'm only in my early 50s, and the implication that I was too old or set in my ways to live in a family neighborhood felt like a slap in the face. Our argument attracted the attention of other neighbors. Mrs. Thompson, 78F, from across the street came out to see what all the commotion was about. She's lived in the neighborhood for over 40 years and is kind of the unofficial peacekeeper. She tried to calm us both down, but by that point we were both too angry to listen. Mrs. Thompson later told me that she'd never seen two grown men act so childish, which made me feel ashamed but also more determined to stand my ground. The next day, I woke up to find my car covered in toilet paper. I couldn't prove it was John or his family, but I had my suspicions. In retaliation, I may have accidentally on purpose let my sprinklers run a bit longer than usual, soaking their yard and the pile of Amazon packages on their porch. As I watched the water soak their lawn, I felt a mix of satisfaction and guilt. This wasn't who I was. My wife would have been disappointed to see me acting this way. Things escalated quickly from there. Over the next few weeks, it seemed like the whole neighborhood got involved. Some people sided with me, agreeing that John and Elena needed to control their dog better. Others thought I was overreacting and should just let it go. The Johnsons next door, who I've known for over a decade, surprised me by siding with John and Elena. They said I'd changed since my wife died, become more irritable and less friendly. Their words hurt more than I cared to admit. Mrs. Thompson tried to organize a neighborhood meeting to discuss the issue, but it quickly transferred into a shouting match. People were bringing up old grudges that had nothing to do with the current situation. Did you know that, apparently 10 years ago, Bob 63M, from 2 doors down, had a tree that dropped leaves in Janet's 61F pool? Because that somehow became relevant to the great dog poop debate. I sat there watching my neighbors argue, feeling like I was watching the community I'd been a part of for so long fall apart. The neighborhood has essentially split into 2 factions now. There's Team No Poop, which supports my right to a dog waste-free garden, and Team Let Dogs Be Dogs, which thinks I'm being unreasonable. It's like being back in high school, with cliques and whispered conversations that stop when you walk by. I've started avoiding the local coffee shop because I can feel the stares and hear the whispers when I walk in. I never wanted it to get this far. All I wanted was to be able to enjoy my garden without having to watch where I step. Now, I've got neighbors who won't even make eye contact with me when we pass on the street, and I'm pretty sure someone signed me up for a bunch of spam mailing lists because my mailbox is constantly full of junk mail. The other day, I found myself sitting in my garden, looking at the flower beds my wife and I had planted together. Instead of feeling the usual sense of peace and connection to her, all I could feel was anger and frustration. It hit me then how much this situation had tainted something that was so precious to me. I've tried talking to John and Elena multiple times, but they either ignore me or tell me to mind my own business. I've thought about calling animal control, but I'm worried that would just make things worse. Part of me wonders if I'm overreacting, if maybe I'm channeling my grief over losing my wife into this conflict. But another part of me feels like if I back down now, I'm letting go of one of the last connections I have to her. So Reddit, what do I do? How do I resolve this situation without completely destroying my relationship with my neighbors? Is there a way to get them to understand my perspective? Or am I fighting a losing battle here? How do I honor my wife's memory without turning into the neighborhood grouch she would have hated to see me become? Update 1. It's been about a month since my original post, and I wish I could say things have gotten better, but unfortunately, they've only gotten worse. First, let me address some of the questions and suggestions from my original post. Many of you suggested setting up cameras to catch Max in the act. I did install a couple of security cameras around my property. They didn't catch Max, but they did catch something else. I'll get to it in a bit. Installing those cameras brought back memories of when my wife and I first moved in. We were so paranoid about living in a new neighborhood that we installed a security system. We never needed it, and we used to laugh about how silly we'd been. Now here I was, 15 years later, feeling that same paranoia all over again. Others suggested trying to talk to Elena again, thinking she might be more reasonable than John. I took that advice and tried to catch her one afternoon when she was getting home from work. It didn't go well. She accused me of harassing her family and threatened to get a restraining order if I didn't leave them alone. I was shocked. This was the same woman who had been so apologetic just a few months ago. As I walked back to my house, I couldn't help but wonder what John had been telling her about me. Had he painted me as some sort of neighborhood monster? Now on to the new developments. About a week after my last post, I noticed something odd. The dog poop in my garden seemed different. It was larger than Max's usual deposits. I brushed it off at first, thinking maybe they had gotten a bigger dog or Max had eaten something that disagreed with him, but something about it nagged at me. I found myself examining dog poop like some sort of amateur detective, which is definitely not how I imagined spending my retirement years. But then, I caught sight of something on my security cameras that made my blood boil. It wasn't Max using my garden as a toilet. It was John. That's right. My adult neighbor was deliberately pooping in my garden in the middle of the night. I sat there staring at my computer screen in disbelief, watching this grown man squat in my beloved garden. I felt a mix of fury and disgust that I've never experienced before. I confronted John with the video evidence, thinking surely this would be the end of it. He'd be embarrassed, apologize, and we could finally put this whole mess behind us. I even rehearsed what I was going to say, trying to find a way to approach this bizarre situation with some dignity. Nope. Instead, John laughed in my face. He said it served me right for being such a pain about a little dog poop. When I threatened to show the video to the police, he said, "Go ahead. It would just prove how crazy I was for installing cameras to spy on my neighbors." His reaction left me speechless. I couldn't understand how someone could be so deliberately cruel and then act like I was the unreasonable one. I was at a loss. I did end up going to the police, but they said that while John's behavior was disgusting, it wasn't technically illegal, as long as he wasn't trespassing. They suggested I put up no trespassing signs and document any further incidents. I left the police station feeling defeated and foolish. I couldn't help but think about what my wife would say if she could see me now, reporting my neighbor to the police for pooping in our garden. She always had a great sense of humor. I'm sure she would have found some way to laugh about this absurd situation. Meanwhile, the neighborhood divide has gotten even deeper. Someone, I suspect one of John's supporters, has started a rumor that I had tried to poison their dog. It's completely untrue. I would never harm an animal, no matter how frustrated I was with its owners. But now I'm getting dirty looks from people who used to be friendly, and I overheard someone at the local coffee shop referring to me as that dog killer from Maple Street. The accusation hit me hard. I've always been an animal lover. My wife and I used to volunteer at the local animal shelter before she got sick. The idea that people could think I would hurt an innocent animal made me feel sick to my stomach. Mrs. Thompson, bless her heart, is still trying to mediate. She organized another neighborhood meeting, this time at the local community center instead of someone's home. It went marginally better than the last one, in that no one stormed out or threw punches, but we're still far from a resolution. Sitting in that community center, I was struck by how much had changed. This was the same place where we used to have neighborhood potlucks and holiday parties. Now, it felt more like a battlefield, with each side eyeing the other suspiciously. The meeting did reveal some interesting background, though. Apparently, John and Elena have a history of neighbor disputes. They lived in an apartment before moving here, and their previous landlord attended the meeting to share how they had numerous complaints about noise and pet issues. As I listened to the landlord speak, I couldn't help but feel a mix of vindication and sadness. On one hand, it proved that I wasn't crazy or overreacting. On the other hand, it made me wonder why John and Elena were so resistant to being good neighbors. What had happened in their lives to make them so inconsiderate of others? This information split the neighborhood even further. Some people saw it as proof that John and Elena were the problem, while others accused their former landlord of harassment and spreading lies. I sat there watching my once peaceful neighborhood tear itself apart and felt a deep sense of guilt. Had my insistence on protecting my garden been worth all this strife? I'm starting to wonder if moving might be my only option at this point. I love my home, and I've lived here for over a decade, but the stress of this situation is taking a toll on my mental health. Every time I hear a noise outside, I wonder if it's John coming to vandalize my property again. I've started avoiding my front yard entirely, which means my garden, the whole reason this started, is now completely neglected. The thought of leaving the home I shared with my wife breaks my heart, but I'm not sure how much more of this I can take. I'm open to suggestions. Reddit. How do I fix this mess? Is there any way to salvage my relationship with my neighbors? Or should I cut my losses and start house hunting? And how do I reconcile my desire for peace with my need to stand up for myself and honor my wife's memory? Update 2. It's been another month, and I'm writing this update from a hotel room. Yes, you read that right. I'm not in my house anymore. Let me explain how things got to this point. After my last update, things continued to escalate. The rumor about me poisoning John and Elena's dog spread like wildfire. I started receiving threatening notes in my mailbox, and someone spray-painted "dog killer" on my garage door. I tried to explain to people that it wasn't true, but it seemed like no one was interested in hearing my side of the story anymore. Every time I stepped outside, I could feel eyes on me, judging me, condemning me for something I didn't do. It reminded me of when my wife was first diagnosed with cancer, and some of our more superstitious neighbors acted like it was contagious. That feeling of isolation and judgment was all too familiar. The final straw came last week. I woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of breaking glass. Someone had thrown a brick through my living room window, with a note attached that read, "How does it feel to be scared in your own home?" The crash jolted me awake, and for a moment, I was disoriented. In my half-awake state, I called out for my wife before remembering she was gone. That realization, coupled with the fear of someone attacking my home, left me shaken to my core. I called the police immediately. They came and took a report but said there wasn't much they could do without concrete evidence of who did it. They suggested I stay with friends or family for a few days until things calmed down. As I stood there in my pajamas, glass crunching under my slippered feet, I felt utterly alone. This house, which had once been a sanctuary filled with love and happy memories, now felt like a target on my back. I took their advice and packed a bag to stay with my sister, but when I tried to leave, I found that someone had slashed all 4 of my car tires. At this point, I was genuinely afraid for my safety. I called a taxi and checked into this hotel, where I've been for the past week. Sitting in this impersonal room, surrounded by bland decor and the faint smell of cleaning products, I can't help but think about how much I miss my home. I miss my garden. I miss my neighbors, the ones who are still talking to me, and most of all, I miss feeling safe. I've been in contact with a lawyer to discuss my options. They've advised me to document everything and said I might have a case for harassment and property damage, but honestly, I'm not sure I have the energy for a lengthy legal battle. The thought of dragging this out even longer, of having to relive every painful moment in a courtroom, makes me feel exhausted. Mrs. Thompson has been keeping me updated on the neighborhood situation. Apparently, my absence has caused quite a stir. Some people think I've fled because I'm guilty, while others are starting to question if things have gone too far. She told me that a few of the neighbors who had been on John and Elena's side are starting to have doubts. They're wondering if maybe they judged me too quickly. It's a small comfort, but at this point, I'll take what I can get. John and Elena, for their part, seem to be reveling in the drama. Mrs. Thompson overheard them at the local pub laughing about how they'd won and driven me out of the neighborhood. It makes me sick to think that this whole situation, which started over something so small, has resulted in me being forced out of my own home. I keep thinking about how my wife would have handled this. She always had a way of disarming tense situations with her warmth and humor. I wish I had inherited some of that skill from her. I've been doing a lot of thinking over the past week. As much as I hate the idea of leaving my home, I'm starting to think it might be the best option for my mental health and safety. I've contacted a real estate agent to discuss putting my house on the market. The thought of selling the home where I shared so many happy years with my wife feels like a betrayal, but I keep reminding myself that she would want me to be safe and happy, even if that means leaving. Part of me feels like I'm letting John and Elena win if I move, but another part of me just wants this nightmare to be over. I never imagined a dispute over dog poop could spiral so out of control. I find myself lying awake at night, replaying every interaction, wondering if there was something I could have done differently. Could I have been more patient, more understanding, or would it have made any difference at all? I'm not sure what my next steps will be. I need to go back to my house at some point to gather more of my belongings, but I'm honestly scared to do so. My lawyer has advised me to bring a police escort when I do. The idea of needing police protection to enter my own home is surreal. It's like something out of a movie, not something that happens to a retired widower in a quiet suburban neighborhood. This whole experience has really opened my eyes to how quickly a community can turn on one of its own. People I've known and been friendly with for years now look at me like I'm a monster, all because of rumors and misunderstandings. It's made me question everything I thought I knew about my neighbors, about community, about human nature itself. I've started looking at houses in other neighborhoods, even in other towns. Each listing I look at feels like another step away from the life I've known, from the memories I've cherished. But maybe a fresh start is what I need. Maybe in a new place, I can find a way to honor my wife's memory without being haunted by the ghost of what our life used to be. I guess I'm writing this final update as a cautionary tale. Neighbor disputes can escalate quickly, and once the community takes sides, it's hard to come back from that. If I could go back in time, I'd handle things differently. Maybe I'd try harder to befriend John and Elena, or find a compromise earlier on, or maybe I'd realize sooner that some battles aren't worth fighting, no matter how right you think you are. But hindsight is 20/20, and now I'm left picking up the pieces of my life. I'm not sure what the future holds, but I know it won't be in this neighborhood. Wherever I end up, you can bet I'll be a lot more careful about how I handle disputes with neighbors. As I sit here in this hotel room, looking out at an unfamiliar skyline, I can't help but feel a profound sense of loss, not just for my home or my garden or my place in the community, but for the simple peace I once took for granted, the ability to walk out my front door without fear, to chat with neighbors without suspicion, to simply exist in my own space without conflict. I don't know what tomorrow will bring. I don't know if I'll find a new home that feels as right as my old one did. I don't know if I'll ever fully trust a neighbor again, but I do know that I need to find a way to move forward, for my own sake and for the sake of the life my wife would have wanted me to live. Thanks for listening to my story, Reddit. If nothing else, I hope it serves as a warning to others to try and resolve neighbor issues peacefully before they spiral out of control, and maybe, just maybe, it'll remind people to be a little kinder to their neighbors. You never know what battles they might be fighting behind closed doors. Now on to the next story. Story 9. I just found out I'm pregnant after having revenge sex with my ex's affair partner's husband. My ex and I met when I was 20 but were only friends until we started dating 2.5 years ago. I found out last year that my ex had been cheating on me for basically our whole relationship with a girl he met through a mutual friend. I broke things off after I found out and told the girl's fiancé about their affair. He ended up breaking off their engagement after he found out, and she seemed nonchalant about it until she realized that my ex's money wasn't his. My grandma left me a lot after she passed back in 2019, and my ex had been flaunting around the things I'd gifted him throughout our relationship to her, even going as far as to claim that the house and antique car my grandpa left for me in his will were my ex's. It's not something I'm proud of now that I think back to it, but I did allow my ex to walk all over me for the first month or two after I broke things off because I missed him so much. I gave him money and tried to make things work, but would always get reprimanded by my parents and friends when I'd run to them crying after he ghosted me for her. I didn't officially give him up until the girl's ex-fiancé messaged me and told me that she was rubbing it in some of their old friends' faces about how pathetic I was and how desperate I was for my ex, who didn't even give an F about me. I was really upset and asked him if he'd be willing to meet up with me because I knew that if I talked to my parents or friends about this, then they'd just lecture me even more. He agreed, and the two of us met up at a random food cart place. We ended up spending most of the day just exploring and talking about how we were doing. He'd also confided in me about his relationship with his ex. They'd known each other for 10 years and they liked each other for most of the time they were friends, but he wasn't looking for a relationship because he was focusing on school. He had decided to give them a chance after she'd driven 12+ HRS overnight to him because they talked on the phone, and he said he was feeling under the weather and was stressed from how vigorous his residency schedule was. She dropped everything to take care of him, helped clean his place, and made him some home-cooked meals after finding out that he was surviving off of vending machine snacks and instant coffee. He told me in detail about how he'd never felt so loved and cared for, how after she'd done that for him he decided that she was the one, that if this wasn't love then love wasn't real. Finding out that she was cheating for the last 2 years made everything click into place. She'd been pushing off getting married, telling all her friends that she was having doubts about him. He'd been trying to convince her into going to couples counseling. When I broke the news to him that she was sleeping with my ex, I felt like a monster. Hearing their love story and then realizing that they didn't get their happy ending because of my ex and I messed with my head. We continued to talk from time to time, checking in on each other, and meeting up for a quick bite every now and then. We lost contact after the girl my ex cheated on me with somehow convinced him to take her back. I became slightly depressed after he cut me off, explaining to me that he was still in love with her and wanted to work things out, which meant a clean slate. I found out through some internet snooping that my ex cheated on her too, which was why she went back to her ex-fiancé. A few months passed and things went back to semi-normal. I started getting therapy and was about ready to put myself back out there to try out the dating pool again. Around New Year's, I got a call from the guy. He was crying and asking if I was available to talk. I of course said yes, and out of concern met up with him at his place. He broke down to me and told me about how he'd found her and my ex in his mom's guest bedroom during Christmas, when she'd snuck him in for a quickie during his family's busy holiday party. All hell broke loose when he'd found them in the guest bedroom after spending 20 minutes looking for her everywhere. We drank a bit and ended up having sex. He apologized and told me that it was a mistake and he wasn't in his right mind, that he just wanted revenge sex, but it didn't make him feel any better. After I tried to message him platonically a few times after to see if he was all right, but he blocked me, so I dropped it and went on with my therapy and life. I went in last week to check with my doctor since I'd been getting bad cramps and to get a new prescription refill for my birth control that I used to help with my PCOS. I had to do a usual test to double-check for the possibility if I was pregnant and was very surprised when it came back positive. I have been sitting on this new knowledge and have been contemplating on if I should tell him, not tell him, or if I should even keep the pregnancy. My doctor did inform that since I am still in the earlier stages, I am still at a big risk of having a miscarriage, so I don't know if I should even be worrying at all about all of this since there is a chance that I could lose it, and then it had just seemed like I was trying to grab at his attention or something, especially after he'd made it clear to me that he wasn't comfortable talking to me anymore after we slept together. I haven't told anyone and have been going crazy because I don't know what to do. Update 15 months later. A lot has happened since my original post. I know a lot of people were against this, but I went through with the pregnancy, and I am forever thankful for my beautiful baby. I had originally planned to get an abortion, but I found myself unable to go through with the appointment. I am pro-choice and always will be. Just because I chose to keep my baby doesn't mean another woman should be forced to keep a pregnancy they do not wish to continue. Everyone has a right to their own bodies. My parents were very upset with me and my whole family disowned me. I listened to what some of you said about letting the father know. We'll be referring to him as D. After many failed attempts to reach out to him, I decided to go in person. D was not happy when I showed up at his place, but when I told him why, he agreed to talk with me. D let me know that he'd officially ended things with his ex and wanted to go no contact with me because I was another tie to his past with her. But he was willing to try and figure out a co-parenting plan with me if I agreed to a paternity test first. I of course felt a bit bad about the paternity test part but agreed to it since we both had only been acquaintances that bonded over our trauma. Everything was honestly easy cruising until I started to spot around the 26-week mark. My OBGYN explained that while spotting is normal while pregnant, mine was heavier, and my blood sugar and blood pressure also both worried them because of gestational diabetes and preeclampsia risk. After a few nights of D insisting on sleeping on my couch, I had him help me move some of my things to his place since he lived closer to the hospital. I am very thankful I decided to semi-move in with him when I did because I went into premature labor at 32 weeks. I am very thankful to have had D and his family as my support system. His mom would come and switch out with him at the hospital and advocated for me whenever I felt washed out or unheard. She helped me both emotionally and physically and stood by me. Dee's mom also helped me work through my emotions when all I wanted was my mom. She and my dad had gone no contact with me after I decided to keep and have my baby. Dee's mom was an absolute godsend. Also, because she's a retired nurse, she started an OB, went to NICU, and eventually later settled into lactation before retiring, and explained things to me when we found out that my baby had respiratory problems and had SUA, single umbilical artery, and that it could have been a factor into why I went into premature labor. She stayed with me so she could help me with pumping since I wasn't able to produce milk and encouraged me when I felt like such a failure for not being able to take care of my son when he needed me most. She drove me to and from the hospital while my son was in the NICU because I was healing and so mentally and physically exhausted. I really and truly believe that I didn't fall into deep postpartum depression because she held me and helped me with each step and was always so patient with me even when I wasn't with myself. Dee's mom would constantly remind me that nothing was our fault and no one did anything wrong. It's just that everyone is faced with hardships in life, and this was one we'd work together to get through. My son graduated from the NICU and came home a month after I did. Dee's mom visited us often and helped with him since Dee and I are first-time parents. Dee's dad joked that he felt like she and I had the baby together, and he and Dee were both just background characters that make guest star appearances every now and then, since Dee was working so much in order to build more PTO and his mom wouldn't bring his dad along when she'd come visit, since she didn't want him to disturb me and the baby with his loudness. Dee's dad is hard of hearing and can sometimes be unaware of his volume, so he took no offense to it. Siblings and family members posted a lot about our son because he was the first grandchild and first baby in a long time. Dee's youngest cousin is 17, turning 18 this year. Somehow, someone must have shared a photo or something, but pictures of us reached my family, and my parents demanded I let them meet my son. Dee was supportive of whatever I chose to do and said he'd agree to them meeting him if that's what I wanted. After thinking about it for a few days, I decided that I wanted to talk to my parents before I let them meet my son. When we met up to talk, my parents were offended that I didn't bring my son with us and left him with Dee's parents. They said some really hurtful things, and then my dad started to question on when Dee was going to ask him for permission for us to get married, since we didn't already have a shotgun wedding while I was pregnant. I was okay with them insulting me since I'd grown up with it and was used to it, but once my parents put their target on Dee and his family, I became upset and decided it was time for us to leave. My parents did try to petition for legal visitation rights. Honestly, before this whole ordeal, I did not even know that grandparents' rights existed, but were denied because my son is still very young and because both Dee and I are very much on good terms, are living in the same household, and they couldn't find or prove that there was any danger to our son's well-being. My family did try to reach out to us and claim that we were horrible people for denying my parents their grandchild, but no one ever seemed to be able to make a peep when Dee's family would defend us and point out that my family had been the one to disown me and that no one cared to see if I was okay until after I had the baby and everything was handled. Dee's mom and my mom got in a verbal, almost physical, altercation after my mom had made false reports to CPS and called the police to do multiple welfare checks on us. My mom was given a warning by the police for harassing us after one specific incident where she threw a tantrum and caused a scene when the police found nothing wrong in the welfare check and refused to listen to her demands to have my son temporarily taken away from us and put in her custody for his safety. Dee and I currently have restraining orders pending against my parents and certain family members. One of the reasons I decided to update is because about 2 months ago, a friend of Dee's asked him out to have some drinks and they ran into his ex-fiancée, who later messaged him to tell him that she regretted the way they ended and how she was very hurt when she heard that we had a baby together, especially with it being so soon after their relationship. Dee wouldn't talk to me about how he felt, and when I asked him, he just rushed me off or switched the conversation onto a topic about our son that he knew would distract me. I noticed Dee pulling away from me and how our relationship became a bit awkward and strained after their run-in and her message, because I know he still has feelings for her, and I'm afraid that he might feel trapped with me and our son. I also noticed that the drama with my family has made Dee and his family less patient with me and my son. During Mother's Day, I overheard a few of his family members make comments to Dee about me being at their family barbecue since I was just my son's mom and not really part of the family. Dee just shrugged and said I didn't have anyone else to spend the day with. With how tense things have been, I have been thinking about moving out and back into my place. I stayed with Dee at his place after I gave birth, but now that our son is slightly older and I am healed, I want to give Dee back some space so that he can start dating again if he wants to and to give him back some more bachelor time. When I have our son, I want to find a way to approach me moving out and us making a co-parenting plan without making things more awkward or possibly ruining the relationship I have with Dee and his parents. I don't want them to feel like I'm not grateful or anything, but I do want to go back to work and get my life back on track so that I can provide my portion of needs for my son and not want to depend on his family for more than appropriate. Now on to the next story. Story 10. I caught my boyfriend cheating and he begged for forgiveness, but when I talked to the other woman, I learned the shocking truth about their year-long affair. I, F29, discovered my boyfriend, M32, of 6 years has been cheating on me with a coworker. I'm devastated and need advice on how to handle this situation. George and I met during our sophomore year of college. We were both part of the same study group for a challenging economics class. I remember being struck by his quick wit and infectious laugh. We bonded over our shared love of obscure indie bands and terrible movies. It wasn't long before we started dating. Our relationship felt different from the start. George was attentive and caring in a way my previous boyfriends hadn't been. He'd leave little notes in my textbooks to cheer me up during exam weeks. When I got food poisoning after a sketchy campus food truck incident, he stayed up all night taking care of me. I come from a family of high achievers. My older sister is a successful lawyer and my younger brother is in medical school. There was always pressure to excel, and I often felt like I was falling short. George was the first person who made me feel truly accepted for who I was. He encouraged me to pursue my passion for graphic design, even when my parents pushed me towards a more practical career. After graduation, we both landed entry-level jobs in the same city. It seemed like the perfect opportunity to take the next step, so we decided to move in together. We found a cozy apartment in a bustling neighborhood, complete with a quirky landlady who always tried to set us up with her grandchildren, despite us clearly being a couple. The first few years of living together were a whirlwind of new experience. We adopted a cat named Whiskers from a local shelter. He was a scraggly orange tabby with a crooked tail who immediately stole our hearts. George and I would spend weekends exploring the city, trying new restaurants, and dreaming about our future. We weren't without our challenges. George's job at a marketing firm was demanding, often requiring late nights and weekend work. I sometimes felt neglected, but I tried to be understanding. We'd argue about household chores or money, but we always managed to work things out. About 2 years ago, George got an offer from a tech startup. The salary was better, and he was excited about the opportunity to work on cutting-edge projects. I was thrilled for him, even though I knew it would mean longer hours. First, things were great. George would come home buzzing with energy, talking a mile a minute about the innovative ideas his team was working on. But gradually, I noticed a shift. He became more secretive about his work, claiming it was all confidential. He started going out more with his work friends, often coming home late smelling of alcohol and perfume. When I tried to talk to him about it, he'd get defensive. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under," he'd say, or, "Why can't you just trust me?" I felt like I was going crazy. My gut was screaming that something was wrong, but George kept dismissing my concerns. This wasn't the first time I dealt with infidelity. My first serious boyfriend in high school cheated on me with my best friend at the time. It took me years to fully trust someone again after that. George knew this history, which made his behavior even more hurtful. Things came to a head last week. George was in the shower, and his laptop pinged with a new message. I know I shouldn't have looked, but something compelled me to check. It was from someone named Shelly with a heart emoji. My stomach dropped as I scrolled through their conversation history. They'd been having an affair for months. There were explicit photos, plans for hotel meetups, and messages about a future together. I felt like I couldn't breathe. This wasn't just a one-time mistake or a drunken kiss. This was a full-blown relationship happening right under my nose. When George got out of the shower, I confronted him. At first, he tried to deny it, accusing me of invading his privacy. But when I showed him the messages, he broke down. He cried and begged for forgiveness, saying Shell meant nothing to him and it was just a stupid mistake. I was too shocked and hurt to even respond. I packed a bag and went to stay with my sister. George has been calling and texting nonstop, alternating between apologies and anger. Part of me still loves him and wants to believe we can work through this. We've built a life together over 6 years. We have a lease, shared finances, and of course, there's Whiskers. But another part of me knows I can never trust him again. How can I believe anything he says when he's been lying to me for months? And what about Shelley? Does she know about me? Is she going through the same pain I am? I'm not sure what to do next. The thought of starting over at 29 terrifies me. We had talked about marriage and kids. Now all those dreams feel shattered. I worry about George's mental health if I end things completely. He's struggled with depression in the past, and I'm afraid of what he might do. Then there's the practical side of things. Our lease isn't up for another 6 months. We have a joint bank account and credit card. Who gets to keep Whiskers? The thought of losing my cat on top of everything else is almost unbearable. I've always prided myself on being independent, but this situation has left me feeling lost and vulnerable. I've built so much of my life around George. We have the same friend group, we go to the same gym, we even have standing brunch plans with his parents every other Sunday. The thought of untangling all of that is overwhelming. My family has been supportive, but I can tell they're frustrated. They never fully warmed up to George, always feeling like he wasn't ambitious enough for me. My mom keeps saying, "I told you so," which isn't helpful right now. My sister is more understanding, having gone through a difficult divorce herself a few years ago. I've been throwing myself into work, staying late at the office to avoid going home to an empty apartment. My coworkers have noticed something's off, but I'm not ready to share the full story with them yet. It's hard to focus on design projects when my personal life is in shambles. I keep replaying moments from our relationship in my head, wondering if there were signs I missed. Was he always this good at lying, or did it develop over time? Were there moments when he almost told me the truth? I'm second-guessing everything. I could really use some advice on how to handle this situation. Should I hear George out and consider couples counseling? Is there any coming back from this level of betrayal? How do I even begin to disentangle our lives? Any words of wisdom or support would be greatly appreciated. I'm feeling lost, heartbroken, and unsure of what the future holds. Update 1. It's been about a month since my last post, and I wanted to update everyone on what's happened. First, I want to thank everyone who commented and offered support. Your advice really helped me gain perspective on the situation. After staying with my sister for a week, I decided to move back to our apartment to figure things out. George was still there, sleeping on the couch. We had had some long, emotional conversations where he expressed deep remorse and begged for another chance. He said he'd cut off all contact with Shelley and even offered to quit his job. Part of me wanted to believe him. We have so much history together, and the thought of throwing it all away was painful. But every time I looked at him, all I could see were the lies and betrayal. I kept thinking about all the times he gaslit me when I expressed concern about his behavior. I realized I needed space to process everything, so I asked George to move out temporarily. He was upset but agreed it was for the best. Once he was gone, I felt like I could breathe again. I threw myself into work and spent time with friends I'd neglected during our relationship. My best friend Mia was especially supportive. She came over almost every night, bringing ice cream and trashy movies to distract me. We'd known each other since high school, but had drifted apart when I started dating George. It felt good to reconnect and remember who I was outside of my relationship. About 2 weeks after George moved out, I had an unexpected encounter. I was grabbing coffee before work when I saw a familiar face. It was Shelley, George's coworker. My heart started racing, but I decided to approach her. To my surprise, she seemed genuinely shocked to see me. Turns out George had told her he was single. We ended up talking for hours, and I learned their affair had been going on for nearly a year, much longer than George had admitted to me. Shelley showed me messages where he talked about a future together and badmouthed me. It was painful, but I'm glad I know the full truth now. After that revelation, I knew there was no going back. I texted George that I wanted to meet to discuss logistics for ending our lease and dividing belongings. He showed up at our apartment unannounced that night, clearly drunk. He alternated between crying and yelling, accusing me of ruining everything by talking to Shell. When he started throwing things, I called the police. They escorted him out, and I filed for an emergency protective order the next day. George's mom called me in tears. Apparently, he'd shown up at her house threatening self-harm. She wanted me to talk to him, but I held firm and told her I couldn't be responsible for his mental health anymore. I gave her the number for a crisis hotline and blocked her number. I'm now staying with Mia while I look for my own place. George's brother came by to collect his things, which was emotional but went smoothly. We've agreed that I'll keep Whiskers since I've always been his primary caretaker. The process of untangling our lives has been challenging. We had to close our joint bank account and credit card, which meant hours on the phone with customer service representatives. I had to explain the situation to our landlord, who was thankfully understanding and agreed to let me take over the lease on my own. One of the hardest parts has been dealing with our shared friend group. Some have taken sides while others are trying to remain neutral. I've lost a few friends who believe George's version of events. It's been painful, but it's also shown me who my true friends are. I've started therapy to help process everything. My therapist has been helping me work through the trauma of the betrayal and rebuild my self-esteem. We've been exploring patterns in my relationships and why I might have ignored red flags with George. Work has been a welcome distraction. I've thrown myself into a new project, redesigning our company's branding. My boss has been understanding, giving me flexibility when I need it for appointments or bad days. There are still moments when I miss George and the life we had together. The other day, I found an old concert ticket stub from one of our first dates tucked away in a drawer. It brought back a flood of happy memories, which made the current reality even more painful. But overall, I'm starting to feel stronger. I'm rediscovering parts of myself that I had pushed aside during my relationship with George. I've started taking a pottery class, something I've always wanted to try but never made time for. I'm taking things one day at a time and trying to be gentle with myself as I navigate this new chapter of my life. Thank you again to everyone who offered advice and encouragement. It really made a difference during this difficult time. Update 2. It's been about 6 months since my last update, and I wanted to share how things have progressed. Life has settled into a new normal, and I'm doing much better than I ever expected. After staying with Mia for a few weeks, I found a cute studio apartment that allows pets. Small, but it feels like home. Whiskers has adjusted well and seems to enjoy having me all to himself. I've been focusing on self-care and rebuilding my life one day at a time. I haven't had any direct contact with George since the night I called the police. His family tried reaching out a few times, but I maintained firm boundaries. Through mutual friends, I heard he moved to another state for a new job. Part of me hopes he's getting the help he needs, but I know that's not my responsibility anymore. The most unexpected development has been my friendship with Shelley. After our initial coffee shop encounter, we kept in touch. She was dealing with her own feelings of betrayal and guilt, and we found comfort in supporting each other. We even attended a few support group meetings together. It's an unusual situation, but I'm grateful for her honesty and the closure it provided. Work has been a great distraction. I threw myself into a big project, redesigning our company's website. It was challenging and sometimes stressful, but it felt good to focus my energy on something productive. My boss noticed my hard work and ended up giving me a promotion. The extra income has been helpful as I've been rebuilding my savings. I also started volunteering at the animal shelter where we adopted Whiskers. It's been incredibly rewarding to help other animals find their forever homes. There's a senior cat named Ginger who reminds me so much of Whiskers. I'm seriously considering adopting her as a companion for him. My relationships with friends and family have grown stronger. Mia and I are closer than ever. We've started a tradition of weekly game nights with some other friends. I've also been spending more time with my sister and her kids. Being Aunt Emma to my niece and nephew has brought so much joy into my life. I've started dating again casually. It's been both exciting and terrifying. My first date post-George was a disaster. I spilled wine all over myself and couldn't stop nervously rambling about cat behaviors. But each date gets a little easier. I'm taking things slow and being upfront about my past. I've met some nice guys, but I'm in no rush to jump into another serious relationship. One unexpected challenge has been dealing with mutual friends who are getting married or having babies. It's bittersweet to attend these events alone, knowing that George and I had once talked about our own future milestones. But I'm learning to be happy for my friends while also acknowledging my own feelings. I've been focusing on personal growth and trying new things. I joined a local hiking group and have been exploring trails in our area. It's been a great way to clear my head and meet new people. I'm also taking an online course in web design to expand my skills at work. Therapy has been incredibly helpful in processing everything that happened. I've been working through issues of trust and self-worth, and I'm starting to feel more confident in myself and my decisions. There have been some tough moments. Last month would have been George and I's anniversary, and I found myself feeling unexpectedly emotional. I took the day off work and treated myself to a spa day, focusing on self-care and reflection. I've also had to navigate some awkward social situations. I ran into George's best friend at the grocery store, which was uncomfortable for both of us. We made polite small talk, but it was a reminder of how much my social circle has changed. Financially, Things have been tight as I adjust to living on a single income. I've had to make some budget cuts and pick up some freelance work on the side, but it feels good to be fully in control of my finances for the first time in years. My family relationships have improved. My parents have been more supportive than I expected, helping me move and checking in regularly. My mom even apologized for her initial "I told you so" reaction, which meant a lot to me. There are still days when I miss the life I thought I would have with George, but those moments are becoming less frequent and less intense. I'm proud of how I've handled this situation and excited about the future. I'm rediscovering old hobbies and trying new things. I've started taking a ceramics class and I'm terrible at it, but I'm having fun. I'm planning a solo trip to Europe next year, something I've always wanted to do but never had the courage to pursue when I was with George. It feels scary but also exhilarating to be making plans just for myself. To anyone going through something similar, know that it does get better. Trust your instincts, prioritize your own well-being, and don't be afraid to lean on your support system. You're stronger than you know. Thank you all again for your support throughout this journey. This meant more than I can express. We have reached the end. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and give us your thoughts about the stories in the comments section. Thank you and see you in the next video.